Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 251, Cannonier vs. Rodriguez, also known as UFC Vegas 102. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com, and with me, as usual, is Keith Shillan, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing on this fine Super Bowl Sunday here in America?
I'm doing good. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. We're if you are a regular enough viewer that you remember us from this time last year on Super Bowl Sunday, Keith and I tend to punch out as much of the prelims as we can before the big game, and then we get back together for the main card, either when the game is over or when it might as well be over. Like, if it's 42-7 at the half, we're probably going to be texting as soon as Kendrick Lamar is done. Let's just punch out that,
That's who's doing the halftime?
Yeah. Yes. He's doing the halftime show.
Shows you how not cool I am. I had no idea.
Yeah. Hey, I wasn't sure which teams were in it until 3 days ago.
Oh, there you go.
As soon as the Skins / Commanders and Texans were both eliminated, I kind of tuned out for the next week or two. So
I wish I did that with the Patriots. I would have tuned out in October.
You would have tuned out 6 years ago.
Yeah.
All right, man. We less than 24 hours, in fact, hell, barely more than 12 hours ago, we finished talking about UFC 312. Not going to go down as maybe the most sensational pay-per-view card of the year. It had its moments. Part of it dragged. But UFC's back at the Apex.
Yes.
UFC Vegas 102. It's the season of middleweight for the UFC. We've talked already about how basically all the UFC's middleweight top 10 are fighting within the first 10 or 11 weeks of 2025. But even beneath the Imavovs and Adesanyas and everything, and Cannonier and Rodriguez, who headline this card, just a lot of the kind of meat and bones of the division are active. There are 3, I believe, middleweight fights on this card. And while the others aren't super, super high level, I mean, Rodolfo Vieira and Andre Petroski, whoever wins that is picking up a nice little bit of momentum in the division. Edmund Shabazian is still only 27 years old. He still got time to turn a corner. That's the main point of interest in this card for me, is kind of just watching a whole UFC division sort itself out before our very eyes. But aside from that, what other goodies are on this card? What are you looking forward to?
I like the co-main event a lot. I like Yusuf Zalal. I mean, he's been on you really talk about a guy who turned around his career. He's got the biggest fight in his career now against Cavalcanti. A little bit of a passing of the torch moment. Can this Cater have anything left to hold off the rising guy like Zalal? I'll mention that. And then the Bonfim brothers are on this, so that's always cool that both guys are fighting. So yeah, there's some things. I mean, when the UFC really knows what they're doing, this is why they're the best in the game. When a pay-per-view lets you down, you always make it up to the fans by giving them what they want. Jared Cannonier, the needle pusher. So I do have a little bit of a cold, so I apologize if my voice cracks or anything. I'll try to mute as much as I can. But let's do this.
Let's do this, man. First up at UFC Vegas 102, at least as the card is set up as of the beginning of fight week, is a women's bantamweight clash between Julia Avila and Jacqueline Cavalcanti. Avila, the 36-year-old Californian, is 9-3 overall. She's 3-2 since joining the UFC out of Invicta Fighting Championships about 6 years ago. She's coming off a loss. She got tapped out by Miesha Tate at UFC on ESPN, Dariush versus Sarukian. The fact that it was a Miesha Tate fight should tell you part of the other problem, and that is that Avila has been on the shelf for over a year. That fight was all the way back in December of 2023. I'm going to be honest, I thought she had said she retired after that, or maybe I just assumed that she was going to retire, but I was mildly surprised when I saw her name come up on this card, a month or two ago. But nonetheless, she's back. She does need to get back in the win column, and she's going to have to do it against Cavalcanti. 27-year-old Portuguese fighter. I mean, she's born in Brazil, but she's Portuguese now. She's 8-1 overall. She's a perfect 3-0 since joining the UFC as the outgoing LFA women's bantamweight champ. She fought twice last year, pretty close together. She fought Josiane Nunes in August at UFC on ESPN Cannonier versus Bahalio, winning by split decision. Then came back for UFC Paris, UFC Fight Night, Moicano versus Saint-Denis just 5 weeks later, and won a split decision again over Nora Conn. So she'll look to make it 4 straight to open her UFC run. Considering the state of the UFC women's bantamweight division, that might be enough for a title shot for all we know.
That's right.
And she is comfortably favored to get it done, as Cavalcanti is minus 500, Avila plus 375 coming back. I'll say this.
If she won 5 in a row at featherweight, she'd be the greatest of all time.
People would be beating the drum for like the UFC to re-sign Cyborg. And now that we've mentioned that, there are definitely some things to like about Jacqueline Cavalcanti. And one of them is that she is a for real, like big-bodied, powerful bantamweight. She fought at featherweight frequently on her way to the UFC. Her only career loss is at lightweight. So, you know, I'll probably talk about that in a minute, but she looks at this point as though she can make 135 comfortably. And when I look at her game in general, it kind of makes me think of a bantamweight Taila Santos, where Taila Santos was not unskilled. Like, she was a solidly skilled fighter who just got better and more well-rounded as she worked her way into the title picture. But what made the whole thing run was that she was a big, athletic woman for the division, and it just made everything easier for her. You know, lent power to her strikes, made her wrestling and grappling, you know, just that much more effective just because she's a big physical fighter. Cavalcanti has some of that to her game. It's when a fighter has 9 professional fights and 3 of them are split decisions, I think it is worth looking into why that is. Is it just the weird vagaries of MMA judging and she just got bad luck of the draw in a third of her fights? Or is she one of those Jorge Masvidal types that just has a fight style that lends itself to split decisions? I think it's a little of column A, little of column B in her case. Now, she's coming into this fight off of 2 straight split decision wins over Josiane Nunes and Nora Conn. But it's worth noting that those fights were only controversial in the eyes of one judge. You go to MMAdecisions.com, every single media person thought she beat Nunes, and all but one thought she beat Conn. Like, it's like 11-0 for her on the Nunes fight, like 9-1 on the Conn fight. And in both cases, she kind of got hosed by a single judge. In one case, it was Ron McCarthy, who's one of the worst busy judges at the UFC. And the other was the UFC Paris one, where she got a French judge that almost never judges high-level MMA, and now we know why. So it's not that she is a dyed-in-the-wool split decision machine, but there is a little bit of that. I think she is somebody that could get better at putting her stamp on rounds. Like, and if you're watching this, you've seen fights like this. Hell, you probably saw 5 or 6 of them last night at UFC 312, where it's 4 minutes into the round and either person could take the round if they would just march forward and throw 3 punches. Like, they don't even all have to land, but just it's waiting for someone to just plant their flag and say that I was the more effective offensive fighter this round.
Just do Duplessis for 30 seconds and you win.
There you go. Yeah, do Duplessis, just do some made up move that doesn't even have a name, you know, but is effective. Cavalcanti has a little bit of that, and it's something that may never change, or it may just change as she grows in confidence. At this point, she's 3-0 in the UFC. She has to understand she belongs at this point, and she just needs to step on the gas a little bit more. Take better control of her fights. They're in both the Nunes and Conn fights. I kept seeing moments where it would have been to her advantage to turn to the ground game against a fighter that was kind of holding their own in the striking, or vice versa. You know, kind of deny the clinch, keep short, stocky Josiane Nunes away from her, and keep it on the outside where just by the optics, she looks like she's winning the round, you know, and it's not nearly as controversial. I say all of that, and I took that big aside just to say that I'm not comfortable with her as a 5-1 favorite, even over Julia Avila. And Avila is, a fun fighter that I rooted for in Invicta, but kind of a modest talent, marginal UFC talent. And that was when she was like 30 and fighting more regularly. Now she's 36, hasn't fought in over a year. If Cavalcanti fights the way that she fought against Nunes, the way she fought against Cornol in the rematch, I don't know why those two women have fought twice. We have another split decision coming down the pike. Because if you let Julia Avila do what she wants, she's going to punch her way into the clinch and try to hug you there and maybe take you down if the opportunity presents itself. This is a woman who, when she was in Invicta, had her fight style announced as competitive snuggling. And I thought it was very appropriate. I think it was a bummer that the UFC nipped that in the bud when she came over. But this is a clear as day 30-27 if Cavalcanti keeps Avila on the outside, just pelts her with low kicks, gets her jab going, shucks Avila off when she comes crashing in. Like, Cavalcanti's going to be taller, rangier, and younger and faster. But I don't trust Cavalcanti to do that. I think Cavalcanti is probably going to let this turn into a Julia Avila fight for long stretches. So while I think she is by far the better fighter, especially right now, again, it would only take one drunk judge and one with a slight hangover for this to be a split decision win for Avila. I'm going Cavalcanti by split decision, but I think it's going to be another kind of scream at the TV fight for me where she should just be dog walking Avila, and instead it's 3 close, hard to score rounds. But yeah, give me Cavalcanti by decision.
Oh man. So, you mentioned that Avila, she talked about retiring and all this. So she doesn't have to fight. I mean, she's a geologist. I mean, this girl's a genius. And
yeah,
she went to Notre Dame. Did you know that?
I knew that she had like an advanced degree and like had a good job. I don't think I knew where she'd gone to school. But that's awesome.
Freaking Notre Dame. So she actually didn't retire. What happened is the UFC cut her, and then a bunch of female bantamweights walked into Dana White's office, throwing down their fight shots and saying, For Julia, this one after another kept doing it.
They just did the Rudy for Julia.
I mean, you're the only ones old enough to get that reference. Somebody somewhere, hopefully they got that right. It's my dad's favorite movie. Yeah, but Joe Montana wrote it for you. Told me when he told us all the fake things about that movie. Anyways, so Julia, I've kind of always liked her. She's big for the weight class. I've described her in the past as this, like, she's a brute. She's a pressure fighter that has good volume, works behind a jab, throws a lot of combinations, has decent power. She loves high kicks. She throws a lot of high kicks. I like her stepping knees. Her pressure kind of leads to her getting hit a lot, and as she's getting older, that's concerning. She also keeps her chin high in the air. She closes the distance and uses her strength well in the clinch, where she can kind of outmuscle women. She likes upper body takedowns. The problem is, for someone who's a decent offensive wrestler, she's a terrible. Decent offensive wrestler. She's a terrible defensive wrestler, and that's because she backs straight up when she's pressured. I mean, Miesha Tate ragdolled her, and this wasn't,
it wasn't UFC, prime Tate.
Yeah, isn't it UFC 200? Miesha Tate, whenever she won whenever she won the title, but
yeah, it was 200.
No, 200 when she lost the title to Amanda Nunes.
Oh, right.
A lot of people forget that the UFC 200 headline was Miesha Tate versus Amanda Nunes. Yeah. Anyways, she even got taken down. She even got taken down by Sijara Eubanks. She can't get off the bottom too. She does have like a BJJ background, and she'll look for subs off her back. I mean, she almost triangle choke Eubanks. To say what you want, Eubanks has always been a pretty good grappler, and she's got 2 submission wins, including subbing Stoliarenko, which is obviously pretty good when you considering you're talking about jiu-jitsu.
And Stoliarenko's about the most one-dimensional ground fighter.
Yeah, exactly. Cavalcanti, she's a really good athlete. That's what stands out to me. She moves well. She likes to get her opponents to chase her a little bit and then counter. She can fight at both stances. She's a good striker, very relaxed and poised. Fast hands. She attacks with combination. She's pretty accurate. I love her short. She has a short, tight right hand. It's probably her best punch. She has decent power in her hands too. She's hard to hit because she has good head movement, and when she's not dotting her head, she also parries punches, which is actually one of my favorite types of defense. She's got a good kicking game, hard calf kicks, though she'll sometimes throw naked leg kicks. And she doesn't check kicks, which is also an issue. She hardly ever wrestles, but defensively, she's hard to take down. She has no subs on her record, so that's concerning. But she's got good cardio. I mean, on the regional team, she's going 25 minutes. She's going hard 15 minutes. I agree with what you said about the split decisions. Like I thought both fights, she looked pretty good. I'm with you. I don't understand the line, and that's not like a knock on Cavalcanti. I just think Avila is a decent, like you're, never going to be a champion or anything like that. But it's always like, like a guy we're going to see later on this card, like a Jared Gordon, like tough out for a lot of people. Avila's output gives her chances, better chance than I think the line suggests. And this might be a step up in competition for Cavalcanti. But I'm still going with her. She's younger. She's faster. She's a cleaner striker. I think she used her movement to avoid Avila's attacks, and then she counters her own. And I said she does it for all 15 minutes. Give me Cavalcanti by decision.
Next up on the UFC Fight Night 251 undercard is the lone heavyweight matchup on the card, unless Angela Hill really, really blows it on Friday. It is Valter Walker versus Don'Tale Mayes. Walker, the 27-year-old Brazilian, is 12-1 overall. He is 1-1 since joining the UFC early last year. He dropped his debut via decision to Lucas Dresky, but came back at UFC 305 last August and tapped out Junior Tafa late in the first round. He'll look to build on that momentum, put his lone career loss further in the rear view, and in order to do so, he will have to get past Mayes. The 33-year-old Kentuckian is 11-7 with one no contest overall. He is 4-5 with one no contest in the UFC. He is alternated wins and losses for the last 2 years plus, and he is coming off a loss. He fought Shamil Gaziev last August at UFC on ABC Sanhagen versus Nurmagomedov, where he dropped a unanimous decision. So by the pattern, he should be due to get back in the win column, but the odds makers think he's about to buck the trend, as Walker is a moderate favorite at -185, Mayes plus 155. I said this about the Justin Tafa fight last night at UFC 312, where I hate picking unranked heavyweight fights, because if you're wrong, you're really, really wrong.
Yeah. We are wrong a lot, so.
And here's one where either guy is perfectly capable of knocking the other out in the first 2 minutes of the fight. And if neither does knock the other out in the first 2 minutes of the fight, we are probably in for a level of misery that might make time seem to start to stretch and warp. This fight might feel 4 hours long if nobody gets knocked out early. Obviously, these are two of the biggest guys in the UFC heavyweight division. They're not the tallest anymore, but they're among the tallest. They're both like 6'6". They're both guys that cut to make 265 pounds. Obviously, Valter Walker has far more upside than Mayes. Mayes is what he is. He's 33. He's a heavyweight, so he could continue to fight at this level for another 10 years for all we know. But it would be strange to see him get any better at this point. He's an absolutely massive guy who does throw very hard strikes. And despite our ongoing joke about him being the leading exponent of the Kentucky Judo Federation, kind of a lousy ground game for such a huge guy. We've seen him get bodied by notably smaller heavyweights. Worth noting that the lone no contest on his record was him getting kind of steamrolled by Hamdi Abdelwahab for most of their fight until Abdelwahab got really tired late. Walker is at least a little more intriguing. He is, of course, the younger brother of UFC light heavyweight wild man Johnny Walker. And he's similar in some ways. I mean, he's equally titanic, if not a tiny bit bigger. He has not, I don't think quite the same level, but a similar type of freaky athleticism and ability to close distance and cross the cage for such a giant guy. Like, he's not what you would call plodding, but he's even wilder and sloppier than Johnny. He's even more defensively porous, which is saying a hell of a lot. And what we have on him in terms of tape is him against some very, very overmatched people on regional scenes, and then his 2 fights in the UFC. But even when he was fighting really overmatched people in, Russia and the Middle East, he was not a finisher. This is a guy that, was going to kind of grindy decisions against 3 and 6 fighters early in his career. He dropped a decision to Lucas Stresky, in his UFC debut. That wasn't great at the time, and it hasn't aged particularly well. This is a terrible fight, man. I mean, I think Walker's gonna win. Mays could knock Walker out. Walker comes in swinging wildly. Mays finds the chin. Walker could do the same to Mays. But honestly, I don't think either guy knocks the other out early. So I think we get the classic 266-pound guys slapping titties for 3 increasingly slowed down rounds as they both get tired. Gimme Walker by decision. I think he's going to throw more volume, and if there are any moments of standout offense, they're probably going to come from him. So gimme Walker by decision, but it's going to be one where neither of us is raving about the strides he's made in his skills or his new upside. He's just another dude.
I'd see Mays win by knockout and run around the cage screaming Kentucky Judo Federation. like the old school,
like doing an old, like the Kentucky Judo version of the Gracie Train.
Yeah. When they got a knockout, they used to scream jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, but his cornermen couldn't put him on their shoulders, I don't think.
No. Always, yeah. They got to get Hickson to pick him up.
Yeah.
I mean, Mays, he is what he is at this point. I mean, he's a really bad athlete, though he does fight out of both stances. He wants to move forward, but he really struggles when he's pushed back on his back foot. He's a low volume striker, which actually works well for him based on his terrible cardio. He's not very fast. He does have power. I mean, let me look at the guy. He loads up in everything, and he tries to end the fight with one single blow. He throws a lot of looping punches down from his hips. It gets tired. It starts going further and further down the hips. He also he throws a lot of lead uppercuts, which I don't like. I mean, he has that Kentucky Judo Federation background, but I mean, there's black belts in judo, and then there's like world-class black belts in judo. You're talking about your Kayla Harrisons. I'm pretty sure that Mays is like he's like this guy who brings. So my son is part of a wrestling and judo team. My son does some judo too. It's definitely not his primary. Wrestling is his primary, but we do. Try to do like once a week. We don't get in that much, but this one guy who like brings his, I don't know, his son's, he's probably a little bit younger than my son. He's like 8 years old or something, and they both got a punch balls. Like that's Dontel Mays coming into the Kentucky Judo Federation. Speaking of that kid, I love this kid to death. I don't know. He's like, he does wrestling too. He's like the opposite. Judo is his main thing, and then he wrestles a little bit. So the day he's at wrestling practice, and I'm like kind of coaching. I'm like, what I do is when they're live wrestling, I walk around and I just get like, I almost like start commentating next to the people, and I'll be like telling them what to do. I'll just pick one person, start coaching them. So I'm coaching him. He's on bottom, and I'm telling him like, hey, get up to your base, work up. And he's just like stuck, and he's just, and he just looks up and he goes, I'm trying.
That's awesome.
But like, it wasn't like, he wanted to let me know, like I didn't know. And it's so funny because I saw a meme or a video where it was like growing up doing that too. Like, his was like so innocent. I know that guy. I mean, Mays judo is as irrelevant as like a lifeguard at the Olympic swimming pool. Like he never looks for it. I mean, he got a few. I mean, when did he get takedowns? He got a few takedowns against Josh Parisian. but he's a terrible defensive wrestler himself. He has no ability to get off his back. He plays BJJ off his back. When he took Parisian down, he did advance and actually was looking for a crucifix, but that had a lot more to do with Parisian than it being bad than Mays being good. His cardio has improved, but again, that has a lot more to do with him fighting at a very slow pace. Walker's only 27, which is really young for heavyweight, so I like that. He's massive. He's 6'6". He's very raw on the feet. He moves forward. He throws a lot of big haymakers, but they're not technical at all. He's a bit of a brawler on the feet. Shocking for Johnny Walker's brother, but he does have good power. He has 6 KOs, but again, like smashing tomato cans. I like his step in knees, and he will throw a high kick. I mean, he hurt Alex Nicholson with a high kick back in the day. Actually hurt him twice with a high kick back in the day. His defense is bad. He's very hittable. He pulls his head straight back. He likes to close the distance or work in the clinch. As you mentioned, like his world is slapping titties. He can when he's inside, look for knees in there and stuff. He will wrestle, and his entries are pretty good, especially for a heavyweight. He does need to improve his top game, though. He will stall at times. He's so big, though, when he lets his hands go on top, he's got mean ground and pound. And he does have 2 subs on his record, including catching Junior Toffer in a slick heel hook. Though my 8-year-old buddy there who told me he's trying to get a bottom might be able to heel hook Junior Toffer. So, and he's gassed out in the past. I'm with you, dude. I'm not hiding either one of these. I will say this is probably the best guy that Mays could beat. This is the ceiling for Mays. I really want to take Mays. Just everything in my gut keeps telling me that Mays is going to win, but I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to go with Walker. He's younger. He is the submission threat. I think both guys will throw haymakers and hurt each other, and I think they'll both tire out and get really ugly, and then we get those moments where they're both like looking at each other and they like mutually agree to like take breaths together, like, all right, let's take 3-4 breaths before we start throwing punches again, and then the punches are coming from the hips and it's like looping. And the one thing is Walker could get the fight to the ground in sub-maze. Like that could happen. I don't think we're that lucky. I think we get some like ugly moments and Walker's going to win as he wins some positions, but I feel like he's gonna like take down Mays and he's gonna slide off, and then Mays is gonna do something, and then he'll get swept, and it won't be like great technique. It'll just be he doesn't know how to balance his weight, and they just keep going on. And I think we're in 15 minutes for just oh god. So give me Walker by decision.
We head down to the men's bantamweight division next for a matchup between Vince Morales and the debuting Elijah Smith. Morales, the 34-year-old Idahoan by way of Nevada, is 16-8 overall. He is 3-6 across 2 separate stints with the UFC since joining as a veteran of the second season of Dana White's Contender Series. He lost on the Contender Series, got choked to sleep by Domingo Pilarte, got signed anyway a little later, but didn't have a great first run. He went 3-5, was cut, went and won 5 straight fights in various regional promotions, including wins over a couple of fellow UFC vets in Hunter Azure and Teruto Ishihara. That got him the call back to head over to France and face Taylor Lopoulos in hostile territory at UFC Paris last September. He showed up, he put up a good fight, but he did drop a unanimous decision to Lopoulos. But as recompense for doing the UFC a solid, he gets at least one more shot here, and he's got a tall task in the form of the debuting Smith. Smith is just 22 years old, Colorado Springs native. He's 7-1 as a pro. He fought on the Contender Series last September, taking a pretty one-sided unanimous decision over Aaron Tao. That punched his ticket to the big octagon, where he will make his debut on Saturday. The odds do favor the newcomer. Smith is -230, Morales +190. Keith, I always feel like Vince Morales should be a better fighter than he is, and maybe I just need to get it through my head that he's not. Tell me whether I'm right or wrong, and how good Smith is.
So I'll say this. So he lost. You said he lost to Lapalus in his return. Yeah. I'm much higher on Lapalus than you are. So yeah. I do think that's a pretty tough test.
I just think Lapalus is boring. I don't think he's bad.
I think you're boring.
Then I feel sorry for you because you talk to me 6 hours a week.
yeah. Lapis wanted me to tell you that he thinks you're boring.
Oh, okay. I would love it if he just came and talked shit to me like that. That'd be so funny. I think you're boring.
Yeah. Vince Morales, I think I agree with you. I think he's better than his record suggests. He's a counter striker. He likes to slip and rip. He's got good accuracy. He has a little bit of pop, and he has a killer instinct. He'll swarm when he hurts his opponents. He'll throw some kicks. Not a huge kicking game. He doesn't check leg kicks. Like I go back to that Jonathan Martinez fight where he got his legs destroyed by Jonathan Martinez. But that was like the rise of Jonathan Martinez, and he started destroying everybody's legs. He wants to wrestle, and he wrestles a lot. Pretty quick entries. I wouldn't say like he's like world-class wrestler, but he has that threat. Not the best defensive wrestler though he does have 2 submission wins on his career, but he also has 3 submission losses. So it's kind of like what you're saying. Like you start thinking, oh man, this guy got some skills down there, and then he also gets subbed a bunch of times. So it's like I kind of see what you're saying. Now Elijah Smith, shout out to old UFC veteran Gilbert Smith. This is his son. That's how old we are. Remember when his dad was fighting. I think he's much better than his father was. It's not knocking his father. I mean, his father was a low-level UFC talent. Right. He probably had a couple.
If Smith wins 2 fights in the UFC this year, he's unquestionably better than his dad. But
yeah, I mean, he's 22 years old. He's 22 years old, which is obviously very impressive to make the UFC already. So, but also what we saw in the Contender Series and saw in the regional scene, he's at the age where we can expect to see a big jump in improvement. He's a great athlete. He's pretty technical on the feet. He's got fast hands. He's got a long jab. He throws straight shots down the pipe. He's kind of like he has like deceivingly long arms. He's good at meeting his opponent at the point of contact and being fast on them. He kind of springs into his shots, which I like. I'd say he has plus power, and he's not really in those power years yet. He does drop his hands a little bit, which is concerning. He throws some good calf kicks, though. He on the Contender Series, he went to it early and then kind of abandoned it the rest of the way. He's a good wrestler, though he will shoot without a setup. He had a great hip throw on the Contender Series early. Once the fight hits the ground, he's definitely more of like a funk wrestler. You can see that kind of scrambles to get to crack down position and baseball slide through and stuff. So more of that newer generation of wrestling that we're seeing. But he really gassed on the Contender Series. I mean, that was a pretty big pressure and it was a pretty fun pace fight. I do think Morales is a UFC talent. I think he's a lower level UFC talent, but that's still a compliment. I mean that as a compliment. I like Smith as a prospect. I don't see him as a future champion. Again, it's hard to really take a read and judge a guy when he's only 22 years old. But what I see him, I could see him developing as a solid mid-card level fighter, like a Jeremiah Wells level kind of guy, which is pretty damn good. So I'm leaning Smith. I think he's better than Morales everywhere. He's younger. He's bigger. He's a better athlete. He's got more power on the feet. Probably more technical on the feet. Morales will press the wrestling, but I actually think Smith might be a better wrestler. I say Smith wins everywhere. I don't think he's polished enough to get the finish against someone as tough as Morales. So give me Smith by pretty convincing decision. Yeah.
I see that as the most likely outcome as well. Morales, he's 34. I was surprised that he's that old, but then I have to remember that his first UFC run was actually 6 years ago at this point. I agree with the scouting report on him, and I think it's worth noting that it sticks out that Jonathan Martinez wrecked him with leg kicks, but he's not gotten better about that. He still has problems checking leg kicks. That was what drove a lot of Lapilus' success against him, is that he kept kicking in the calf. It stopped Morales anytime he started to build momentum.
But it was super boring. It was. I mean, all the kicks were so boring.
See, they should have put Lapilus versus Morales on this card. See if they could even sell out the Apex. That's how boring I think Lapilus is. It's like mini Chet Congo.
Hey, that's my boy Chet Congo.
Yeah, that's your boy. I agree that Morales wants to wrestle. Smith wants to wrestle when he does, but Smith is probably the better wrestler of the two. And, the fact that he's 12 years younger, faster, more athletic is going to help that as well. I think it's worth noting that, Morales' takedown defense, it's not as good as his offensive wrestling, but it's worth looking. He had that 5-fight win streak between when he was cut by the UFC and when he was re-signed. 3 of the wins were submissions that ran off the front headlock. He tapped out Teruto Ishihara with an anaconda choke, Luis Guerrero with a Bravo choke, and then Hunter Azure with a Peruvian necktie. He looks for the front headlock in scrambles, and he defends takedowns with the front headlock. Doesn't always jump the guillotine, but that's his first instinct is kind of wrap the neck up. If Smith is careless, he could be like sleeping in in a pile of twisted limbs in like 2 minutes. I think that's the outside chance. Like Smith's only loss so far was getting clocked in a fight in which he was otherwise winning the striking. I think he goes on to win a pretty straightforward decision here as well. I think it's one where it's going to offer a lot to people who see him as a top prospect. I think he's going to look sharp. I think he's going to look fast against Morales. I think he's going to have good success denying the things that Morales wants to do. But that danger's there. If I were a betting man, I'd be scared to take someone kind of as unproven as Smith against someone who has as much high quality experience as Morales and has kind of such a clear route to quick victory if he catches Smith napping. But I'm going with Smith here as well. Give me Smith by decision. Speaking of fights where one fighter is the righteous favorite, but the other one has a very obvious route to quick victory, next up at UFC Vegas 102 is a welterweight clash between Gabriel Bonfim and Khaos Williams. Bonfim, the 27-year-old Brazilian, is 16-1 as a pro. He's 3-1 since joining the UFC as a veteran of Season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series and as the outgoing LFA welterweight champ. He fought just once last year. He picked up a unanimous decision over Angelosa at UFC on ESPN Namajunas versus Cortez in July. That allowed him to bounce back from his first and thus far only career loss. He got Nicholas Dalby by Nicholas Dalby back in November of 2023. It's going to happen to a lot of young prospects before it's all said and done, but he bounced back like you would expect him to, and he's looking to start up a new win streak here against Williams. Williams, 30-year-old Michigan native, 15-3 overall, 6-2 in the UFC. He's on a 2-fight win streak. He dropped a split decision to Randy Brown all the way back in 2022. Since then, he has wins over Rolando Bedoya, even though that was all the way back in 2023. And then in his only fight of last year, back in May, he knocked out Carlston Harris in the first round. That was at UFC Fight Night, Barboza versus Murphy. So Khaos, the Ox fighter, looking for his 3rd straight win. Bonfim looking for a 2nd straight win. Bonfim is a comfortable favorite at -225. Williams +180 as your underdog. And as I kind of jokingly alluded to, I get why Bonfim is the favorite. He's younger. He looks to be a super legit prospect. The loss to Dalby did not dampen that at all for me. Nicholas Dalby at this stage in his career is the perfect trap fight for a young, athletic, less experienced prospect, because Dalby's not going anywhere. He's insanely durable. He's got incredible cardio, and he's one of those guys that makes the cardio an issue. Like if you don't have the cardio to hang with him, he's going to leave you in the dust. He's kind of like a bleached out Neil Magny that way. You're in trouble if you can't keep up the pace. Yeah. So that didn't bother me. And all the things that Bonfim was good at, he's still good at. He's a big welterweight. Like, he's not the tallest one. He's not Randy Brown. He's not, any of the ridiculous beanpole Aussies we saw last night. But he's big. He's muscular. He's already a good striker. Like, he has just good natural hand speed, good power, good pop on everything. Not as defensively sound as he could be yet. You look at his record, he's got 12 submissions out of 16 wins. And it's not just an opportunistic thing. He forces the issue. Like, he strikes to open things up for him to bring it to the ground or to force his opponent into bad takedown attempts. And from there, he's a very solid grappler, pretty good wrestler, like not the most technical, but just being strong, being fast, being fluid on the ground. He's got nasty ground and pound. Like by all rights, you know, he should be a greater than 2-1 favorite against Williams, but Williams has, to quote a combat sports cliche, the ultimate equalizer. He might be the hardest hitter in the 170-pound division, and he's one of the hardest ever. And there have been some monsters in that division, but Chaos Williams he's got those. I mean, he's got the elephant gun knuckles. I was there for the UFC debut where he stepped up on short notice and absolutely cold cocked a pretty good friend of mine in Alex Morono, like here in Alex's hometown. Bad night at the office for my guy, but at least he got knocked out by a guy that has definitely proven that the power is not a fluke and that he does belong in the UFC. And he is more than just a haymaker merchant. Like, he's a crisp boxer who throws in combination. Like, he knocks people out because, like, he usually knocks people out, like the Carlston Harris fight aside, he usually knocks people out with the second or third punch in the combination because he's throwing solid combinations. He is projecting where they're going to be, and he's throwing strikes to where their chin's going to be. Fast hands, tons of power. When he does kick, his kicks are sharp, his kicks are fast, his kicks are hard, but he'll abandon them. He you know, his perfect fight is a boxing fight. He's not bad when he's forced to the ground, but that is his last resort. He doesn't want to fight the fight to go to the ground. I see this as a pretty straightforward win for Bonfim, unless he gets caught on the feet and knocked out. Like, Williams can knock anyone out with one punch, including Bonfim. I'm not picking it. It's tempting for me to take Bonfim by submission. Williams has never been finished. And again, for a guy who kind of presents as a pure stand-up fighter, he's proven very capable of, proven to be a solid defensive wrestler and capable of taking care of himself when things go to the ground. I'm not going to pick Bonfim to be the first one to crack that nut, but give me Bonfim in a pretty one-sided decision where he does get Williams down, maybe more so as the fight wears along, and does damage with ground and pound, maybe has Williams in trouble a couple times in the fight. Give me Bonfim by decision in a very entertaining fight.
Yeah, this is definitely one of my favorite fights on the card. This should be on the main card. I mean, it's really disrespectful to these guys. You know, you got a rising prospect in Bonfim and Chaos Williams, who's got a really good record in the UFC. I mean, he's a fan favorite. He's got 2 nicknames. I mean, how can you not like this guy? I mean, one of his nicknames is the Ox Fighter, and the dude's got the death stare down. I couldn't imagine I'm about to fight, like, be your boy Alex Morono looking across and just seeing this death stare from a guy who knocks everybody out, named the Ox Fighter. Like, yeah. Oh, my Lord, it's scary. It is a little hard to get a read on. So when Cass Williams first came to UFC, like I definitely thought he was a UFC talent, but I didn't think he'd be as well as he is. And I still really feel like I don't have a good read on this guy. You know, he marches down his opponent. He throws a nice stiff hard jab. He loves this like jab straight right combination that he does. Dude hits. I mean, you talk about hitting hard. I mean, the guy hits as hard as anybody. I mean, he's one of the pound for pound best, hardest hitters in the game. I mean, I think I rank him number 2 for like pound for pound hardest hitters in the UFC. Yeah. I mean, obviously Bo Nickal's number 1.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, he's
like, that's mostly the head kick, you know.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about you talk about welter and you talk about the hardest hitters ever. Like Robbie Lawler obviously is a knockout artist. Like I think I'd rather take a punch from Robbie Lawler than Chaos. I mean, I'm talking prime Robbie Lawler. Like, yeah, I don't want to take a punch from either of these guys, but
no.
You know, and of course we're talking about different level of fighter. You know, one guy is, you know, world champion. The other guy's
stand in front of him, give him one clean shot. Chaos Williams might be the last 170 pounder in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely want to get punched by him. Hard calf kicks, though he'll throw some naked kicks. Not the most technical striker defensively. He drops his hands, he keeps his chin high in the air, but he punches really well. I mean, like you mentioned, he's never been stopped. He will wrestle a little bit. He doesn't, like you said, it's definitely his second choice, but he'll go for a takedown every once in a while, sneak it in there. I would say he's great at it, and he's definitely not like this jiu-jitsu wizard on the feet. If he gets taken down, he wants to get back up and throw bombs. Bonfim, he's a pressure fighter. with tons of output. He's very fast. He comes and he fights that way. He comes out. I said before, he comes out the gate like a cannonball. He's a pressure slip and rip striker, quick hands, accurate. I love his check left hook. He throws a lot of power shots. He loves uppercuts. He will keep his chin high in the air, and that's extremely dangerous against Chaos Williams. He's a good wrestler, nice entries. He's insanely strong. Look how he slammed Trevin Giles. Great top game. I mean, he has a submission threat. He's got 12 subs on his record. He subbed Lazez. He subbed Giles. He likes his guillotine, like that's his go-to. He'll jump for it a little too much though, when he's better off just controlling and then looking for it. And he's got good cardio. Yes, he lost to Dalby, but Dalby's the man. I think the line should be closer. Bonfim is way more technical on the feet, but you mentioned it, the ultimate equalizer is the power of Williams. And I think I'm not completely sold on the Bonfim brothers. Like, I do think they're good talent. I think there could be future top 10 guys, but I think there's people who are ready to crown these guys. Your Brazilian, Adesanya. Actually, not Adesanya. Makhachev and Habib. Like they're ready to think these two guys are taken by storm. I don't see them as that. I do think they're obviously a good talent. And also, I'm not really sure how good Williams is, and I think I've been sleeping on him for a really long time. I am going to go Bonfim because he has more avenues for victory. I think he'll take Williams down. Can he catch a submission? No, I understand what you're saying, that Williams has never been subbed. But after I just bashed the Bonfim brothers and said I don't really believe him like other people do, I'm going to say Bonfim is the first one to find. I think he actually catches that guillotine. Give me Bonfim. Williams is so tough. He probably doesn't even tap out. He probably goes out cold. But give me Bonfim by submission, second round.
All right. If it ends up being Bonfim by technical submission, you actually pick the nap rather than tap correctly, we'll have to do something special. Okay, and I did think of one name. The only other person in that same general kind of size range that I would less rather take a clean punch from than Chaos Williams would be Melvin Manouf.
Oh, yeah, he's a little. I mean, he fought the way up to heavyweight.
Yeah, I mean, he usually fought 170 or 185. But yeah, you want me to go up and punch Mark Hunt? Dude, he knocked out Mark Hunt. Freaking middleweight that knocked out Mark Hunt.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Another guy, a prime guy, I wouldn't want to get punched with, and it was, some of it was his downfall. Johnny Hendricks.
Oh yeah.
Johnny,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Like pre-USADA, Johnny Hendricks was terrifying.
Yeah, he had that. Well, he had that natural country strong, and then you add in what he was probably adding in. Forget that's like unfair.
Yeah, like I assume that the steaks at his Big Rig Steakhouse in Oklahoma City, like that was not natural USDA antibiotic free beef. That was like some Ellis Rovereem horse meat steaks right there. It is just a couple hours later, but thanks to the magic of television and me having taken a shower in the intervening time, I'm wearing a different shirt, different hat, and we're back previewing UFC Vegas 102. Keith and I started off the Super Bowl saying, okay, we'll get as many fights done as we can before the game starts, and then we'll meet back up afterwards, or, as soon as it's safe turning the rest of the game off. We turned it off when it was 40-6, I believe. But honestly, I hesitate to speak for Keith, but if it had been the Chiefs up 24-0 at the half, we probably would have started again already. But we were both just having too much fun watching them get their asses kicked.
That's right.
So on my Bulls list would be Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Got a perfect front row seat to watch somebody take a step back in meeting his legacy as perhaps the greatest North American team sports athlete of all time. On some petty level, he's going, it's harder than it looks, isn't it?
He's playing it cool on here, but afterwards he's laughing. Tom Brady never got exposed in the Super Bowl. I shouldn't say exposed, but he never got blown out. Patrick Mahomes has been blown out twice now in the Super Bowl. 1-2 Tom Brady, don't forget. But yeah. So let's get to the real talk. Ben had to put a hat on, change his clothes, and that's just because of the amount of fans he has gotten since he shaved his beard. Just the ladies have been flocking to him. So he's like He's like Leonardo DiCaprio trying to like hide out at a public place. Like that's why he's got the hat on and everything.
They're flocking. They be flocking. All right, so the UFC Fight Night 251 undercard soldiers on with a lightweight matchup between Jared Gordon and Kaue Fernandes. Gordon, the 36-year-old New Yorker, is 20-7 with one no contest overall. He's 9-6 with one no contest in the UFC since joining as the outgoing CFFC featherweight champ. He was a featherweight for a long time in the UFC. He's moved up to 155 as he feels that suits his body and his fight style better in his mid-30s. He is coming in off a loss. He dropped a split decision to Nasrat Haqparast at UFC on ABC, Whitaker versus Alaskarov last June. This will be his first in-cage appearance of 2025, and it will be against Fernandes. 29-year-old Brazilian is 9-2 overall. He's 1-1 in the UFC. He is coming in off a win. He fought Muhammad Yahya at UFC on ABC Sandhagen versus Nurmagomedov last August and picked up a buzzer-beating TKO late in the first round. That got him back on track after his UFC debut loss to Mark Jacqueline. So he's looking to string together 2 wins in the octagon for the first time. He is not favored to do so, but the line is fairly close, at least by the standards of this card, as Gordon is minus 180, Fernandes plus 150. I got to be honest, I was a little surprised at the line on this one. And I like Jared Gordon. He's one of I don't know if he's one of our guys, but he fits the mold of, fighters that we like to watch and talk about. Kind of a hard-nosed, reasonably well-rounded guy who probably never be a top contender, but he's reliably jumped up and upset people that should have beaten him, throughout his UFC run.
We like overachievers.
Yeah, we absolutely. I mean, it's fun to talk about underachievers, unless they're like John Dodson, but overachievers. They're our guys. I see Kaue Fernandes as being kind of from the mold of the guys that Jared Gordon takes to school in the gritty, grimy decision. Like Fernandes is bigger, younger, more athletically gifted. Probably a cleaner striker in like a technical scientific sense. I was surprised to see him be the underdog here. I kind of expected him to be a mild favorite. I'm glad that Gordon has moved up to 155. Even though he's a fairly short, stocky guy for the weight classes he competes in, he didn't look great in some of his losses at 145 and gave up a ton of size to people like Charles Oliveira anyway. Here, he's reaching that age where a fighter who depends as much on durability as he often does, who has taken as many shots as he has in his wins as well as losses, there could be a steep fall off any fight now. Like if he, we haven't seen him in 7-8 months. If he goes out on Saturday and he looks as good as he did against Nasrat Haqparast and Marco Madsen, I think he's ripe to upset Fernandes. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if we just find him a good bit slower. Maybe we find his gas tank not to be quite what it was, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years ago. I think he's already going to be giving up speed to Fernandes, even if he's at his best. If he's slowed down any beyond that, if his chin is compromised after 10 years of being, even though he's from New York, what Sherdog associate editor Jay Petrie would call a Boston-style face-first striker. If that started to tell on him at all, this could be a big level-up moment for Fernandes. And much as I hate to do it, that's kind of where I'm leaning here. I like Fernandes I say prospect because he's fairly new in the UFC, but he is like 28 or 29. But I like his physical tools. I think he's with kind of a good team, the right team for a guy with his skills in his weight range. I kind of expect he's going to be able to frustrate Gordon on the feet. I think if anyone tries to bring this fight to the ground, it's more likely to be Gordon, and it's more likely to be either that's his game plan right off the bat, like he and his team have decided, okay, we just need to take this dude down, or it'll be after a round or two of not liking what he's getting on the feet, and I think he's going to struggle trying to do it. I'm leaning Fernandes here by a pretty one-sided decision. Not going to pick the finish against a guy as durable as Gordon, but give me Fernandes. This is kind of outclass Gordon in all phases here and pull off kind of a complete consummate performance like he hasn't really done in his 2 UFC fights yet. Yeah, give me Fernandes to really kind of piece Gordon up at range, turn aside takedown attempts, Gordon to be frustrated trying to get into range to work his boxing, to get the kind of takedown entries he wants. Yeah, just give me Fernandes to make Gordon look like he might be slipping a bit.
Yeah, this is an intriguing fight just because a lot of things you said. I mean, Jared Gordon, I mean, he's not a very good athlete, but he just makes up for just being insanely tough. He's on the feet. He's high output, not the most, technical striker, but he's I think he's probably more technical than he gets credit for. He can fight out of both stances. He throws some tight boxing. He's got a good power jab that he throws from the southpaw stance. But because he's not this great athlete, he's not the most dangerous striker, not very explosive, not a lot of power. He needs to clean up his defense. He's very hittable. He pillars to avoid strikes. He will close a distance, and he does really well in the clinch. He doesn't mind grinding on his foe, good clinch striking. I mean, we saw that against Paddy Pimblett. We saw that against Mark Madsen. He's a good wrestler. I mean, I was impressed. When he out-wrestled Chris Fishgold, he wrestles a lot. He has the mindset to get the fight down. He doesn't care if you stop his first 100 takedowns. He'll shoot 101. If he gets the fight to the ground, he's a good grappler, good top control, good ground and pound. His ultimate game is, outworking his opponent for all 15 minutes, never stopping, and he's got incredible cardio for a guy who's been in the game for a long time. Fernandes, he's a very aggressive striker on the feet. He has some good power. He throws a lot of hard shots. He throws a lot of hard kicks, great calf kicks. He's got a quick high kick. He does keep his chin a little high for my liking. He doesn't move his head. He's a decent wrestler. He likes upper body takedowns. He does move better on the ground if he gets it there. He's a BJJ black belt. I've seen him even pull guard to get it down. I don't think that'd be a smart move against someone like Gordon, but it's not in the realm of possibility. He can get a submission off of his back. He's got 2 subs on his record. He's a weak defensive wrestler, and he struggles to get all on the bottom. And he's also gassed in the past. I'm with you. Fernandes is a way better athlete. The problem is, and this is where we're kind of going opposite directions, I don't think it's going to matter that he's a way better athlete. I think his speed advantage is not going to be a big deal because I think he's going to spend most of the time pinned, with the shoulders on the mat for majority of the time. I think Gordon's going to wrestle. I think he's going to wrestle a lot. And I think he's going to slowly grind Fernandes down, tiring him out. Give me Gordon by decision.
All right. We have our first disagreement of the card, and he's probably right. Men's flyweights take the cage next at UFC Vegas 102 as Rafael Estevam faces off against Jesus Santos Aguilar. Estevam, the 28-year-old Brazilian, is a perfect 12-0 as a professional mixed martial artist. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC as a veteran of Season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series. That's the good news. The bad news is that Season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series was 2.5 years ago. His UFC debut took him almost a full year after that. He had 2 possible debuts, I think, canceled before then because either he or his opponent fell out. But it wasn't until November of 2023 that he made his actual debut. Looked fantastic in taking a unanimous decision over Charles Johnson, marred slightly by the fact that Estevam missed weight. And then he's been back on the shelf for over another full year with a variety of injuries. So still just 28 years old, but plenty of question marks hanging over him as, again, he's fought just once in the last 2.5 years, and that one time he missed weight. But he's going to look to get back on track here and keep his record spotless against Aguilar. 28-year-old Mexican is 11-2 overall. He is 3-1. And there's the story of two fighters right there. These two guys fought on the same season of Dana White's Contender Series, like within a couple weeks of each other. Estevam has 1 fight since then, and Aguilar has 4. He's 3-1 in the UFC. He dropped his UFC debut to Tatsuro Taira, which is a fairly excusable loss in hindsight. Taira's looked pretty damn good. And since then, he's been perfect with wins over Shannon Ross, Mateus Mendonça, and Stuart Nickal. The most recent of those, the Nickal fight, was at UFC 305 last August. So he's going to look to make it 4 in a row. And in a men's flyweight division that is still very crowded at the top, but kind of wide open beneath the number 6 or number 7 slot, 4 wins in a row makes a lot of headway for you. Incidentally, Aguilar is not favored to get that 4th win in a row, as Estevam is minus 350, Aguilar plus 275. Keith, I'm going to flip this one to you first.
Wow.
It's certainly a vote of confidence that a guy who again has fought once since the Contender Series, put on a good performance against a very good fighter, but missed weight, is a 3.5 to 1 favorite over a not bad fighter either in Aguilar. Tell me how you see this fight going.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that Estevam is the favorite, but not by that margin. I mean, maybe like negative 180, something like that. Something I thought. Aguilar, you mentioned his record in the UFC. I thought he lost to Mendonça, so take that for what it's worth. But he's a short, stocky guy. He's got really good output on the feet. Marches down his foe, just tries to get inside and initiate type of brawl. I've seen him almost knock himself over trying to land a shot because he's so aggressive. He throws a lot of hard power shots. He showed against Shannon Ross the ass and power. I mean, he stopped him in the first round. He throws hard kicks. His defense isn't good, though. He's very hittable. He hits a lot of shots. He will wrestle, and I think he's a little underrated. He's got some quick entries. He will shoot from distance without a setup, though. I don't like that. He will look for throws, but a lot of times he doesn't have like the best posture, so he ends up on bottom. But sometimes he just does it just to kind of keep his scramble, and he wants to just be the busier guy. If he gets to fight the guard, he does need to improve his top game. But he does. If he gets it down, he's landing big shots from on top. He's a submission specialist. He's got a bunch of subs. He's got a very good guillotine. It's like his specialty move. It's like a finishing move for him. He's got 5 wins by guillotine. He won by guillotine in the Contender Series. He's a weak defensive wrestler. He struggles to get off the bottom. Estevam, he missed weight his last fight, so watch out for that. I mean, that was a really long time ago.
If I may interject, I
Sure.
should have mentioned this off the top. Aguilar actually missed weight in his last bout as well. It was down in Australia. He was fighting Stuart Nickal. He weighed in at like 127.5 or 128.
Yeah.
So maybe these guys deserve each other. I don't know, but at least Aguilar actually has made weight a couple of times.
Yeah, I should shut up then because I missed that he missed weight. He's a brawler on the feet. He throws everything with fight-ending intention. He throws a lot of looping punches. He throws a lot of hard kicks. He's a solid wrestler himself. He's good at winning scrambles. He gets fights that go on hard ground and pound. He has a BJJ black belt. So he has some good back takes, though he can be a little too aggressive on the ground to find the sub-loose position. What I didn't like is, he didn't miss. He missed weight in his last fight, so this could be it. But he also gassed bad in that fight, and that's obviously really concerning. I'm not very high in either guy. I can't believe that Estevam is, that big of a favorite. I'm sure some of that simply has to do with him being undefeated. I'm going to go the opposite way, man. I'm going to say Aguilar. He's a very opportunistic grappler. Estevam wrestles. He slows down. I think he's going to make a mistake. I think he's going to get guillotined. Give me Aguilar to catch a guillotine. I say it's a pretty big upset, but I say it does in the second round.
I love the pick, and I kind of waffled on this one back and forth because there's a whole other thing here. I mean, Estevam, he's not Tatsuro Taira. He's not Muhammad Mokaev. He's a guy that wouldn't have nearly, I think, the hype behind him if he didn't have the undefeated record, but I do think he's a decent, solid prospect for the division. But given that he's just 28 and he's having these year-plus layoffs, one after the other, withdrawing from fights with, injuries, I just think of a lot of lighter weight fighters that kind of followed that track, and then they came back still in their late 20s, early 30s, and just seem to have gotten old and brittle overnight. I think of people like Thomas Almeida comes to mind. I'm sure there are others if I think about it long enough. So outside of just the chance that he, eats a haymaker or shoots right into a guillotine, there's also the possibility that he comes back and he's just not the same dude. That's something to take into consideration as well. I'm shying away from the upset here, but I see the upset value, and if I were a betting man, I would steer way the hell clear of the favorite here, or even including it in a parlay. Give me Estevam to hold on and win a decision here in a fight that doesn't really elevate his stock much. But if Keith's right, I would not be terribly surprised at all. He and I have both picked some pretty big upsets this year, and we're batting a goose egg so far, but this might be the first time one of us takes a 3-1 or greater favorite and it pays out. Yeah, I like this one. Next up at UFC Vegas 102, and at least as the card is constituted as of the beginning of fight week, the top prelim is a strawweight matchup between Angela Hill and Ketlen Souza. Hill, the 40-year-old Marylander by way of San Diego, is 17-14 overall. She is 12-14 across two separate stints with the UFC. She joined first as a part of the cast of season 20 of The Ultimate Fighter, which inaugurated that division. She lost on the show to eventual inaugural champ Carla Esparza, went and won a bunch of fights in Invicta, won the strawweight title there, and was snatched back up by the UFC as the sitting champ, and has had mixed results since then, as evidenced by the 12-14 record. But she has won 2 of her last 3, 4 of her last 6 after a pretty brutal stretch in 2020 to 2022. She's coming in off a loss. She dropped a unanimous decision to Tabitha Ricci at UFC on ESPN, Cannonier versus Bajallo last August. That snapped a 2-fight win streak for her. So she'll look to start another one here at the expense of the little hothead. Ketlen Souza, whose nickname, Esquentadinha, means little hothead, 30-year-old Brazilian, 15-4 overall. 2-1 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Invicta flyweight champ. She debuted in the UFC at flyweight, did not like what she got from Karine Silva in her promotional debut, decided that her best future lay at 115 pounds, and since then she is perfect with back-to-back wins over Marnik Mann and Yasmin Jauregui. The most recent of those, the Jauregui fight, was in September at Noche UFC. So she'll look to make it 3 in a row. This might be the only fight on this entire card that I bothered to do this with, but I'll flip these odds to you, Keith. Your favorite is -140, underdog +110. Who are they?
I'll say Angela Hill's a favorite.
You are correct, sir. Angela Hill is the favorite. That's a fairly rare occurrence these days. It feels like she is the underdog a lot of the time. The UFC seems to have figured out what Angela Hill is for. There are 600 some fighters on the UFC roster. Of the 600, there are about 30 that are current or former champs. And of the other 570 or so, it's really hard to come by ones who are recognizable or memorable. There's a reason that Sam Alvey got to stick around the UFC into like a 317 fight losing streak, because he's one of the few non-top contenders who's instantly recognizable to the casual fan. Angela Hill has a little of that energy. I think at this point, the UFC has, long since cut bait on the idea that Hill is going to be a title contender. I mean, she's 40 and she's under 500 in the UFC, but she's also proven to be a little more than just, like, if she's a gatekeeper to the top 10, not a gatekeeper to, do you even belong in the UFC? Like she's maintain competitive relevance while remaining kind of a fun personality and, depending on matchups, a reasonably entertaining watch as a fighter. You and I did the math late last year, and either Angela Hill or Kevin Holland is the fighter that we have previewed the most times in the 4 or 5 years that we've been doing the show together. And I think I can speak for both of us here where I love Angela Hill. I'm glad she's in the UFC, but I'm kind of done previewing her fights because for the most part, the scouting report hasn't changed much. At her best, she is a high volume, low power Muay Thai striker with bad takedown defense, but reasonably good grappling defense and a decent get up game. Like that's the Angela Hill scouting report right there. The one impressive thing she has to offer among those strengths and weaknesses is if you have no way of getting Angela Hill down, but just kind of barreling straight forward and trying to put your hands on her, like that's a heavy bag, which is why she will periodically just wreck somebody like Ariane Carnelosi, because you know it's a younger, stronger, more athletic fighter, but has no way to get the fight down but to just keep running into her knees and elbows. Honestly, that might be a little of what we get with Souza, because Souza, I mean, she's a full decade younger than Hill. She's a better athlete, but she's cut from the same physical mold as the fighters where Hill just kind of jumps up and looks really impressive. Like if you're really short, really compact, and you depend on, you know, like physical contact, not fast shots from the outside to get your takedowns, Angela Hill can look pretty good against you. Problem is, Souza hits hard too. And while Hill is normally defensively sound and very tough, like hard to hurt badly on the feet, that has been slipping in her late 30s. At this point, she is actually 40. This could be like, I mean, give me Souza in the mild upset here. I you know, knowing her, she's going to come forward. She's going to come forward swinging. She's going to put Hill on the back foot. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that she catches Hill with some big shots. And I'm not going to say she just knocks her out, but hurts her, puts her out of her game, and kind of the ball starts rolling downhill. Give me Ketlen Souza to pick up a third straight win in the strawweight division at the expense of Hill. I'm going to say this one goes to the judges, but it's one that gets like more lopsided each round as Souza just seems fresher and keeps putting damage on Hill. I think she can take Hill down, but she might not have to. She might just be able to kind of mug her on the feet.
It's funny when it comes to Angela Hill, like I feel like I've never had that good a read on her, despite seeing her fight about 1 million times now. You know, she's a high output striker who she uses good footwork to kind of keep her distance. She hates being pressured. She wants to work from the outside. Nice jab, nice left hook. She does attack the body, which I like, but she's a bit of a point fighter. She lacks power. She avoids strikes with good head movement. She's a slip and rip striker. Her slip right hand is probably her best blow. She will lunge into her shots, which kind of leaves her open to be countered. She wants to either be all the way in or all the way out. She has really improved in the clinch, grinding her opponents. What used to be a weakness for her, I think it's actually a strength now. I mean, like she beat up Emily Ducote in the clinch. She beat up Denise Gomez in the clinch.
Loma. Yeah.
Loma in the clinch. She likes framing and blasting with elbows. Sorry, I'm having a hard time with my throat. My throat's bothering me. She's not much of an offensive grappler, though she did take Denise Gomez down. She subbed Luana Pinheiro, which I think says more about Pinheiro than Hill, especially because that's her first sub in her career. She's always had weak takedown defense, and there's a long list of people that be able to take her down and hold her down. I will say her takedown defense has drastically improved recently, and especially her get-up game. But, you know, still obviously a weakness. She has good submission defense. I mean, Mackenzie Durb was struggling to submit her, so that's impressive. And she's got good cardio. Now, Ketlen Souza, I love the nickname. Little hothead, like that's fantastic. I think that's what they called me in elementary school. But you mentioned she's a short, stocky fighter. She's a boxer with good footwork. She tries to move a lot and then try to land when her opponent chases her, and then she counter strikes. She's got good head movement, but she needs to she needs it because it keeps her hands a little wide for my liking. When she gets in range, she unloads big power shots. She does hit hard. She throws hard kicks too, hard kicks to the calves. When she gets inside, she also looks for elbows, which I love. She can sneak in a takedown, but I definitely wouldn't call her a wrestler. I think you're a little higher in a wrestler than I am. She's not a bad offensive grappler, though. She's got some good back takes. She's a weak defensive wrestler. She has struggled when she's getting put on the bottom, and she was taken down and quickly subbed by Karine Silva. But she's got good cardio. Like I said, I don't have a good read on this fight. Like I said, I don't ever feel like I ever have a good read on Angela Hill. I'm going to go the opposite, though. I'm going to take Hill here. She's bigger. She should be able to use her long-range strikes from the outside. I think she actually can win the clinch if Souza gets inside. Give me Hill. In classic Hill case where it comes down to a split decision or something, this time I say a lot of times she's lost split decision. This time I say she's going to win one. Give me Hill by split decision.
The 6-fight main card of UFC Fight Night 251 begins with a featherweight matchup between Conor Matthews and the debuting Jose Delgado. Matthews, the 32-year-old from Freetown, Massachusetts. If my New England geography is correct, Freetown is right across the border from Rhode Island, which means
Freetown. I'm not really sure.
Freetown / Lakeville. It's like right across. It's near Fall River.
No, I think you're wrong. Freetown. Let me see. You keep talking. I'll figure it out.
All right.
Oh yeah, no, it is near Fall River. You're right.
All right. So, if it's right across the border from Rhode Island,
near like Dayton. No, near like Dayton. Okay.
Okay. So, not too far from Keith.
It's basically Taunton. It sounds like, which is okay. That makes more sense. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're better at your own geography than where I live. I used to live in Fall River. That's even worse.
Matthews, he's from Freetown, trains in Lakeville, 7-2 as a pro, 0-1 since joining the UFC as a 2-time veteran of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought on season 6 and lost to Francis Marshall, came back on season 7 and beat Jair Farias. That got him signed. He debuted last March at UFC on ESPN, Blanchfield versus Fior, where he got knocked out by Dennis Bazookia. He'll look to bounce back from that demoralizing loss against Delgado. Delgado, 26-year-old Arizonan, is 8-1 overall. He fought on the Contender Series last August. He was week 1 of season 8. He knocked out Ernie Juarez in the second round. That was good enough to get him signed. It's been about 7 months, but here he comes for his debut, and he is a comfortable favorite. He's minus 250, Matthews plus 200 on the comeback. Okay. Keith, I already have a feeling which way you're probably leaning on this one, since one of the guys is from New England, and even I don't think he's all that great. But let me know what kind of upside you see in Delgado and how you think this fight goes.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm making. I've had to put a cough drop in, so I apologize if I'm making noise with that. Yeah, so Ben is the ultimate homer, and I'm like the opposite. I never pick New England fighters. So if I pick a New England fighter to win, like I really think they're good. That's not the case with poor Matthews. He was not a guy that was really on my radar when he was making his UFC debut and everything. And so let's get into his skill set. He's a long and lengthy guy. He's a southpaw. He does do some things well. He's got good output on his feet. Though against Bazooka, he was getting to the pocket, and for some reason he was a little hesitant to let his hands go, which was surprising for a guy who kind of wins by volume. He's a slip and rip guy. He's good at changing his stance in mid combo. And because he was hesitant, he was getting in the pocket against Bazooka, and he was hesitant to let his hands go. He was getting tagged up because of it. He also struggled with the speed of Bazooka. He lacks power. He's not, not a big power puncher. He's got a good kicking game, especially body kicks against orthodox fighters. He has this wide stance, which leaves him open for calf kicks himself. He needs to tuck his chin. I wouldn't call him a wrestler, but I'd say he's more of an opportunistic wrestler. Like he's a guy who will catch a kick to get the fight to the ground, but doesn't have blast through your hips kind of skill. He's a decent grappler. If he gets the fight to the ground, he advances his position. He's got 5 subs. A lot of those against tomato cans, but he's got cardio. I mean, he'll go hard the whole time, but you have to worry about his chin. I mean, he got blasted in many fights and got knocked out. Delgado, I like what I've seen Delgado. He definitely needs to clean some things up, but he's a high output striker, fairly technically sound on the feet, fights out of both stances. He's long and rangy. He also changes stance in mid combination and changes the angle when he does it, which is really good. He attacks with big combinations. He's got some pop in his hands. He's got 4 TKOs. He's got a big kicking game, hard kicks. I mean, we saw that in Contender Series, blasting kicks. Nice step in knee on the Contender Series. He will look for takedowns. He likes body lock takedowns. He'll shoot entries from the outside, but he does shoot with his head down, which that's like some youth wrestling level mistake. So I definitely wouldn't call him a good wrestler. If he gets the fight to the ground, he needs to improve his top control. He's a little bit of funky where his hips are kind of going all over the place, but he has a lot of back takes. So take that for what it's worth. He's got 4 subs on the record, so I like that. He did gas out on the Contender Series, even though he got a stoppage after he was slowing down. But he took that fight on really short notice, so I'll give him a little bit of pass there. You're right. I'm picking Delgado. I mean, Matthews isn't a bad fighter. I don't think he's a UFC level, but I should say I don't think he's UFC level yet. Like he could become a low level UFC talent. And again, I'm not saying that as an insult. Like, if you can reach that's be like saying oh, I have a cousin who plays in the NFL, and you're like, oh, what team does he play for? And you say the worst team in the league. Like, oh, he plays for,
and he warms the bench for him.
And he warms the bench. Oh, he's the backup center for, the Tennessee Titans. I'd be like, damn, that dude's freaking good. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, that's how I feel about a low level UFC talent. I think Delgado swarms him with shots on the feet. I keep picturing, and maybe it's because I just saw this, the great knockout, but he works the body really well, and he kicks the body hard. I can see him crushing Matthews with a body kick, or going upstairs, getting Matthews reach his hand, and coming downstairs with some big blows. Give me Matthews by second round TKO.
Or Delgado by second round TKO.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Delgado by second round TKO.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of teed that one up there with the New England fighter and stuff, but I'm with you in that Matthews has a little more skill and nuance than you would necessarily think. I made the joke once already about the Boston style face for a striker, but his boxing's a little niftier than, insert name of 0-2 fighter who washed out of the UFC here, from New England Cartel usually. But this is not a great matchup for him. I've been mildly optimistic with what I've seen out of Delgado on the Contender Series, but also in some of his regional fights that I watched more recently as this one was coming up. I agree that he's a guy right now with some solid physical tools and upside and some good individual skills that needs to tighten things up. He makes, he has lapses defensively on the feet that there are a lot of people in the featherweight division that are going to punish him brutally for. And I'm not even talking about at the Ilia Topuria level, outside the top 15, they're just hard hitting, fundamentally sound strikers at 145 that are going to ruin his day. Having said that, he's 26, so he's not young, but he's got fewer than 10 professional fights. And there's something of the feel of the 22 or 23-year-old prospect about him. And if you're a featherweight with good raw skills and you just need seasoning and to tighten things up and to have your mistakes corrected for you, you could do a hell of a lot worse for yourself than seeing Sean O'Malley and Mario Batista every day in the gym. MMA Lab is a good place for fighters in that general weight range. And so kind of like a younger fighter than his actual age, he's a guy that 6, 7, 8 months from his last appearance, we could see some market improvement in him. I think even the version of him that beat Juarez after tiring out a little bit would have been more than Matthews could handle, but I have every confidence that he's going to be better and better prepared, at least in terms of cardio. So I'm with you, and thank goodness, because we're 8 fights into this card and I've picked 7 decisions in a row. It's like I'm willing a miserable experience on myself. Obviously, I don't think all of those are going to go to decision, but each of them individually I think is likely to. This one is not. Matthews, little too hittable on the feet. And when you got someone in Delgado that's faster, better reach, probably better power, I think it's going to tell on Matthews pretty quickly. I'm not going to be different just to be different. I think a second round TKO sounds about right to me as well. Give me Delgado by second round stoppage. Middleweights are up next on the UFC Vegas 102 main card as Rodolfo Vieira faces off against Andre Petroski. Vieira, the 35-year-old Brazilian, is 10-2 overall. He is 5-2 in the UFC. He is on a 2-fight win streak. He dropped a pretty demoralizing unanimous decision to Chris Curtis all the way back in June of 2022. Since then, he is 2-0 with 2 submissions, 2 arm triangle chokes, in fact. That's the good news. The bad news is that one of them was in 2023 and one of them was in 2024. And at age 35, even in the wide open middleweight division, you got to fight more than once a year if you want to actually climb the rankings. But here he is, about a year from his last appearance, which was a first-round submission of Armen Petrosyan, and he's going to look for his 3rd straight UFC win against Petroski. Petroski, 33-year-old, Pennsylvania native, Penzo Gracie Philly product. He's 12-3 overall. He is 7-2 since joining the UFC as a semifinalist from season 30 of The Ultimate Fighter. He lost to eventual winner Brian Battle in the semifinals on the show, then destroyed Michael Gilmore at the finale. But yeah, starting with that fight, 7-2, and he has bounced back from back-to-back losses in the UFC with back-to-back wins. He lost to Jacob Malkoun, who was originally supposed to be the one fighting Vieira back last March. He bounced back from that loss with back-to-back wins over Josh Fremd and Dylan Budka. So he's looking for his 3rd straight win here. As I mentioned, he's actually stepping in for Malkoun. He is not favored to get the job done against Vieira. Vieira's minus 225, Petroski plus 175.
That's nuts.
It is nuts. Like, both of these guys, in their own way, are better and more competitive and have had greater staying power than I would have expected 1 or 2 fights into their UFC run. Like, I mean, Vieira, it's hard to get past the Anthony Hernandez loss. And that loss is at this point almost exactly 4 years ago. But it's just one of those things that's indelible, because Rodolfo Vieira, I didn't bother to mention it during the intros, but he is in the team photo for the most decorated BJJ practitioners ever to cross over to MMA, say, before age 32. He's, multiple time Mundials champ, Abu Dhabi as well. Like, one of the greatest grapplers in his general weight range of his era. Look like one of the greatest grapplers in his weight range of his era. I mean, he's a physical specimen. And to see him just gas out so badly against Anthony Hernandez and get tapped out of all things by a guy that, I mean, Anthony Hernandez is one of Keith's and my favorite current fighters in the UFC, but he looks like a barista that does CrossFit. Like, he looks like the guy that sells you your weed. Like, seeing him, like, guillotine a just completely sapped Rodolfo Vieira, 4 years later, I'm still working to get past that, but he's fixed that problem. Like, if you asked me after the Hernandez fight, and I mean, we recapped that, so I may even have said something like this at the time. Like, all right, I've seen Vieira ceiling I bet he does one or two more fights in the UFC and then just goes back to doing BJJ or, teaching or whatever. But instead, 4 years later, he's still in the UFC. He is beating the people he is supposed to beating the people he's supposed to beat emphatically and leaving no question. And at least the gas part, he seems to have fixed. He has finishes in the third round, second round, first round. His one loss in the UFC was when Chris Curtis just pitched an absolute gem of a takedown defense performance. I mean, I don't remember what Vieira's takedown rate was, but I want to say it was like something like 1 for 11, and he got one takedown on the first round, and then Curtis just blanked him the rest of the time. But aside from that, he's wrecked shop. Petroski, another guy that I kind of underestimated. Like, I saw his fights on Tough 30. I obviously saw him at the finale, and I was like, this is a guy that does a bunch of things decently, but his one standout quality is that he looks like one of the toughest guys on the planet. Just this, again, absolute jacked specimen. But
yeah, he looks like a bad guy in like Sons of Anarchy.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. Just put him in like a leather biker jacket with patch. Like, anyway, yeah, that's him. But he's turned out to be pretty damn good and a better striker than I gave him credit for. Already knew he was a decent wrestler, but better kind of positional grappler, even in fast moving scrambles, than I gave him credit for, and better gas tank than I would have expected from a guy as muscular as him that wrestles as much as he sometimes does. Like, he's been a pleasant surprise. But kind of like Vieira, he's a guy that has sort of settled into, well, he doesn't shit the bed. He beats the guys he's supposed to beat, and he beats them, leaving no question. But the couple of times he's had shots at the next echelon of the division, the times he's fought guys, at least in that kind of 11 to 20 range, he's been turned back pretty emphatically as well. This is a chance for one of these two guys to break out of that mold and, maybe earn a shot at a fringe top 15-ish type opponent. Vieira is a greater than 2-1 favorite, but I'm not sure I see it, because yeah, obviously he is a better grappler than Petroski. He's literally world class, but Petroski is pretty damn good on the ground himself, and Petroski is a good offensive and defensive wrestler. And if this ends up being a fight anything like the Curtis fight, where Vieira is stuck on the feet for long periods, his striking has really not come along. He is a serious athlete who has been world-class in one combat discipline. I refuse to believe that he's not working on his striking. He may be one of those guys that just because of his build, because of how broad-shouldered he is, because of how muscular he is, it's just hard for him to develop proper mechanics. Like Brock Lesnar never looked comfortable throwing a punch, let alone taking a punch.
Mark Coleman.
Even though they worked on it.
Sure, Kevin Randleman.
Maybe not Coleman, but but like Lesnar had a really good team around him, and it never took. Vieira gives a little bit of that. I'm with you in being surprised that the line is as wide as it is, but even if it was close to a pick'em, I think I'd be leaning Petroski. And it's nothing against Vieira, just I've underestimated Petroski, and I've underestimated him in the exact areas where he's likely to give Vieira fits. Give me Petroski to win by decision in a fight that looks pretty lopsided by the end. I could see Vieira winning the first round, like able to get Petroski down, or at least just keep him absolutely occupied, keeping himself from being dragged down. But by round 2, Petroski will have a better read on Vieira's takedowns, because for all the things he's great at, he still has a very basic repertoire of takedown entries. They're kind of predictable. And if you're a former college wrestler, so you've been doing this probably since you were 10 years old or younger, all the way up through your 20s, and you're still doing it in MMA in your 30s, if somebody shoots the same takedown on you, 15 times and they're getting more tired each time, it's going to get easier and easier for you to defend. I see Petroski doing that. And again, if they're stuck on the feet, Petroski is not Israel Adesanya, but he's a niftier striker than Vieira. Just throws better combinations. I think he has better footwork. So yeah, give me Petroski to maybe lose the first round, but at any rate to have some trouble with Vieira in the first round, but just to pull away in increasingly lopsided fashion as the fight goes along. And yeah, to probably just be kind of styling on Vieira by the end, marking him up on the feet.
Yeah, I think this line should be much closer because I think they both have some pretty big holes. I think we disagree on Vieira's striking. I mean, he's a really good athlete, so I agree with you there. I think he's a little better striker than you give him credit. And it's not that I think he's got good technique. I think it's the people worrying about takedowns gives him some opportunities. I mean, I like his straight right hand. He does have some power because look at this build. The guy's got muscles on top of muscles, but also just like what I said, it's like when Brock Lesnar would land shots because people worried about takedowns. I was thinking about the knockout that Kevin Randleman caught Mirko Cro Cop with because Cro Cop was worried about an injury, not a left hook coming at him. He does defensively has some issues. He lacks head movement. But he lacks head movement, but he can eat a shot. He's tough as hell. I mean, you go back to the Chris Curtis fight. Chris Curtis was teeing off on him. He didn't stop. Anthony Hernandez was landing big shots. He didn't stop. I mean, even going back to the Sarafa fight, he landed some big shots. What I like about him being a BJJ practitioner, other than what I call opportunistic grapplers, in the sense that they just need to catch the neck 1 second and they end the fight. That's not him. He's a inch slowly grind kind of David Maya style. I kind of really compared him to Hikaru Arona. But other than Charles Oliveira,
that's a great comparison because they even have the same basic body type.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But other than a Charles Oliveira or Brian Ortega, where they might not be as decorated, but they're going for things and they can catch you. What I like about I generally don't like BJJ practitioners. So that's what I was getting to. But one thing I will say about him is that he can wrestle. Like a Hikaru Arona. He's got some fast entries. He does set him up behind his strikes. He drives through the hips, but he doesn't chain wrestle that good. I like what you said that he has the same entries. One thing, he doesn't cut the corner well. He doesn't hide what they call hiding your ankles or what I always tell my son to try to explain to him when when you shoot a single leg takedown, not staying underneath the guy, getting behind him. I always say then you have to disappear. You shoot on him, then you disappear. That's my way of explaining cutting the corner so he can't see you. So he's got those little technical things that isn't good, but he's such a strong dude that he kind of makes up for. He can just, if he grabs your leg, he can just throw it in your head.
Jacare wrestling.
Yeah. Describe it just throw him. He's obviously he's amazing on the ground. I mean, his credentials than anybody we've ever seen. I mean, he's got credentials today. He's one of the best grapplers in history. He is a weak defensive wrestler, but a lot of that has to do with not worrying about getting, not thinking defensively in the wrestling, and also not worried about getting taken down. And he has gassed out in a lot of fights, though his cardio has gotten a little bit better. Petroski, southpaw, he often switches stances. He's a boxer. He throws some tight hooks. He has some powers in his hands, but not exactly what you expect from a guy who looks like the way he did. We describe it as just this alpha male guy. If he's in a movie, he's a bad guy or something like that. He's the henchman in it. He has a lot of defensive issues. He's very hittable. He's been hurt a lot in the feet. I mean, I think guys like Jared Mershot had success with him on the feet, who's not really known for his striking. You got to worry about his chin too. I mean, he was knocked out by Michelle Behead. He was knocked out by Jacob Malcolm. Both those guys are really good fighters, better than Vieira. He's a solid wrestler, but he's not world class. He's a guy that he has a wrestling background, but again, and I know I'm a broken record. If you're not in the wrestling room all the time, you lose skills. He's got a good double leg. He's good at getting to the second level, driving through the hips. He has a really good single leg and running the pipe. He is relentless. He gets the takedowns. But he does a lot of these big moves. It kind of tends to zap his energy a little bit, and he gets stuck on bottom sometimes. if he gets to fight the ground, he does have a good top game. He has no issue just stalling on top. He advances position well on the ground. He loves like head attacks and I'm trying, traditional wrestling arm triangle chokes. He being a wrestler, he is uncomfortable if you put him on his back. He has been subbed in the past. He's a guy because he's hulking and he's got all this muscles and he kind of when he gets tired, his body language kind of sucks sometimes, I should say. But his cardio is better than he looks. Like he looks like a guy who's tired, and he slows down, but he is not completely gassed. Even though when he's sitting in this corner, he's sucking air in between rounds. He looks like he's completely gassed. He'll still come out and fight pretty hard. But a big reason why I said I think this line should be close is it's like I said, I'm not that high on either. I'm going the opposite. I am picking Vieira. I actually think he actually might be the cleaner striker. I think he hits harder of the two, which is, surprising. And a big thing about Petrosky's game is being able to out-wrestle guys. And I don't know if his second nature will be if he gets tagged going in for a takedown, and that'll be a really bad mistake. Trying to take down Vieira, which, I know he can get the takedown, but I can see him getting swept or early in the fight, getting like heel hooked or something like that. I say Petrosky makes a mistake, doesn't fight to the best fight IQ, and I think Vieira makes him pay for it. Give me Vieira to sub him in the very first round.
Wow. This is shaping up to be the preview with the most disagreement between Shillan and Duffy ever. So buckle up. It'll be a fun recap.
It's not often I'm the one going against an American wrestler, but
yeah.
The funny thing is, when he fought Jared Marshall, I think he might have lost, but earlier that week, so I was in New York City, and earlier that week I ran into Petrosky, and he's a big wrestling fan. And we were talking wrestling. It was right after Sammy Sasso got shot, so we were talking about that and stuff. He's a wicked cool dude. Like, I feel guilty that I picked against him.
It's always awesome to hear, the fighters, just decent, approachable person in real life. Most are, but yeah, there are a few that surprise.
Yeah. I've honestly never had anybody be a dick that I can think of, there's always like my handful, but I always think of some people like Ryan Bader is the fucking coolest dude. I saw him at Mohegan Sun walking around, and I interviewed him earlier. And then, Mohegan Sun's not it's a big place, but the hangout areas aren't big. If that makes sense. Like if you want to hide, you go in the actual casinos, but like the lobby and all that. So I don't know how we were right next to each other. It was like, there's no way we couldn't talk to each other because like I just interviewed him, and it was like
it'd be more awkward not to talk.
Yeah, we'd be like. So we were just talking to him like, fucking cool ass dude. I don't know how he talking, but he was talking about his wife was coming in, and with him going early, and I kind of asked him about how the coaches travel and he had one coach who was coming on immediately, and we just talked about that, and he was just being a fucking cool ass dude.
That's very cool.
That's why you'll never hear me say, obviously it's never personal with us. Like we're not the ones who are like, oh, I hate this fucking guy. Like, we're not like that. And just like if I pick against somebody, it's not like I dislike the person. But you won't hear me say anything bad about Tim Silva, because I will always remember being at Mohegan Sun when he fought for, he was sitting there getting fucking booed. And then, I'm that Krispy Kreme or some shit in there, and I'm like hanging out, getting drinks. And this is before I was with Shirt, way before I was with Shirt Dog. And I remember Tim Silva standing like a line after he fought that night, and just a line of people just waiting there, and he was taking pictures and signing autographs to every person. I'm like, I remember sitting there like, this guy just got fucking booed like you wouldn't believe, and he's still sitting there signing autographs, and people in line, people booed him too.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and I'm like, he's coming off like the coolest fucking dude, and I'll always remember that.
That's awesome to hear, because he's a guy that if he came out of the sport kind of just bitter and angry, it wouldn't, for the reasons you kind of alluded to there,
yeah,
it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Absolutely.
Like, just one of the most disrespected and abused elite, fighters in the history of the sport.
But that is not my favorite Mohegan Sun story. Dude, I missed it. That was when MMA was the best. When it was cultish and nobody knew anybody, and we were in the Shirt Dog forum. My favorite Mohegan Sun story, I know you've heard me say it a million times, is how I learned. Huh?
Was it Marlos Kunin?
Oh, Miles Conn I forgot about that one. That's actually a good one. That I might have had a shot, dude. I might have had a shot, Miles Conn. I don't know, man. She was flirting. Yeah. I was a little skinnier then. No, was how I learned. I will always say that's how I learned how to play blackjack. It was, and he tried teaching me craps, but I wasn't catching it. Was Shoney Carter. Shoney Carter taught me how to play blackjack. He wasn't even fighting. He was there.
He seems like
he still might be there. And then I had my wife. I have one. Actually, you know what? My other one was me and my wife. I think we were married or maybe we were dating. We went to IFL, and my wife bought the tickets. We were probably in the fucking nosebleeds, and there's we paid like the freaking $10 tickets, and we walked right down to the front row. We were actually the second row. Who was the lady you saw her for Sure Dog? She sat right next to me. I can't think of her name. She worked for Sure Dog for a long time. Anyways.
Yeah, Loretta Hunt.
Loretta Hunt, yeah. She was right next to me. Dan Henderson was 2 seats over from me.
But he couldn't see you because he can't turn his head.
Yeah, Ryan Gracie sat right in front of me. Almost got in a fight. Of course, it was Ryan Gracie. I had to tell the security guard that he was the brother of the guy fighting the main event. It was Carlos Newton versus Renzo Gracie the second time.
Wow.
Somehow, during this fucking melee of Brazilians trying to get to Renzo Gracie, I think Renzo came out first, or maybe came out second. Somehow the fucking barrier moved, and there was no barrier anymore. And next one I knew, I was standing right next to Carlos Newton as he was going to come out. He fist bumps me. I'm like, hey, Carlos Newton, holy shit. You're about to fight. I'm sitting right next to him. And I remember sitting there thinking, it was so there was no security. I'm like, I could literally just walk down with his corner right now. But I was with my wife, so I was kind of but if it was just me and my boys, I would just walk down with Carlos Newton and been in his corner. But
that's wild because if you were a dick, you could have just sucker punched him right there and the fight's off. Where's the security? You tripped him.
Yeah, and I was in good shape then. I got scrapped. That was when I was starting to fight, I think, too.
You could have taken him down, I guarantee you.
Well, yeah, I don't know if I would have.
You got triangled, but yeah.
Yeah. So, actually, I don't know about that. I might not have. But anyways, Renzo wins in the most fucking snooze fest fight. And somehow I get stuck in these bunch of fucking Brazil. I wanted to give Renzo they were telling me it was wide open, and I wanted to give Renzo Gracie a high five, and then all these Brazilians swarmed him, and I remember Raja Gracie was right, and they had a circle. They were chanting in fucking Portuguese, and I'm right in the middle of it, my hands like this, and I remember thinking, everybody's chanting in Portuguese. They're dancing. I'm right in the middle. I got one hand like this. They got their arms around me. Right, we're all fucking just Brazilian dudes like this. I'm like one of them. They're just treating me like I'm one of their boys. And I was sitting there thinking, Ryan's probably saying, who the fuck's this guy? And he's probably going, oh, that's Haja's friend. And Haja's probably saying, dude, we should just keep this in. This is good shit. Haja's probably Haja's probably who's that? Oh, that's fucking Hector's friend. And then just him. And if my wife wasn't there, I was going to take that as far as it possibly would have.
Just go to the after party.
I would have went to the back. If they were hey, we're getting in a car, I would have jumped in a car. If they were hey, ready to get on the plane, go back to Rio, I would have jumped on a plane. I would have just kept going as far as I could have went.
3 weeks later, they realize Keith doesn't speak any Portuguese.
I was just gonna go.
That is amazing.
And I've seen Renzo he comes to Mohegan Sun a lot, and I always say hi to him and stuff. And this guy's the fucking best. Renzo. If you say who's your favorite Gracie and the answer is not Renzo, shut up. Renzo's the best. But what I love is every time he sees me, he always pretends he remembers me and he knows who I am. He's like, oh, hey, what's up, man? He gives me a hug. Oh, how you doing? And I'm like, this fucking guy has no idea who I am, but he does it every single time.
But he knows he recognizes you from somewhere.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I he just does that to everybody. But he always pretends oh, good to see you. How you been? And it's dude, you don't remember me.
And of all that generation of the Gracies that, more or less moved to America at the same time, he's the one that has the accent that just makes everything he says hilarious.
Yes, he's the man.
Yeah,
he's the absolute man.
Yeah, Renzo, absolutely. Also the best actual fighter of that generation of the family, too. Until Neiman came along, he was the best Gracie in terms of MMA accomplishments.
Yeah. Hickson was always a friggin' folklore, but
yeah.
he never really did it. Yeah, you're right.
All right. Well, after that bit of bonus content, we return to the lightweight division as the other Bonfim brother, Ismael, faces off against Nazim Sadikov. Bonfim, the 29-year-old Brazilian, is 20-4 overall. He's 2-1 since joining the UFC out of season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series. He won his last time out, took a unanimous decision over Vince Pichel at UFC 301 last May. That allowed him to bounce back from his first career defeat, getting tapped out by Benoit Saint-Denis back in July of 2023. So he'll look to put together a new win streak here. It starts with Sadikov. 30-year-old Azerbaijani by way of Long Island is 9-1-1 overall. He's 2-0-1 since joining the UFC out of the very same season of the Contender Series. In fact, I think there are 5 veterans of season 6 on this card, and 4 of them are fighting each other. Anyway, he had a draw in his last outing. He won his first 2 UFC bouts with impressive stoppages of Evan Elder and Terrence McKinney. Then at UFC 295, he was booked against Slava Borshov. That fight ended in a majority draw, and Sadikov has been on the shelf ever since. So about 14 months later, he steps back into the cage and steps back in as just the slightest of underdogs. Bonfim is minus 150, Sadikov around plus 120. Always a little confusing to me that the Bonfim brothers are both nicknamed Hammer, but the smaller of them is Hammer and the bigger of them is Little Hammer. Like Ismael is Maheta, Gabriel is Mahetinha, because he's the younger one, even though he is. It's not just that he's in the next weight class up, like he's like 4 inches tall, like he's way bigger than Ismael.
So if it's Hammer, it's like one's like the framing hammer, and the other one's like a finish hammer.
Yeah, like one's like the little craft hammer my wife has in like the craft room next to her sewing machines and stuff for like tapping it. Yeah, and the other one's like, yeah. At any rate, I'm gonna flip this one to you. Like, you know, we've already talked a little bit about the Bonfim brothers in general, but you know, let me know what kind of trajectory you see for the older, smaller Ismael here, and whether he gets it done against Sadikov.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not as high as these guys as everybody else is, but I'm still pretty high on them. So it's kind of like how I view like crab. Like I'm not like, oh my god, crab's the best food in the world, but like I still like it. That's how I feel. You know, like I'm more of a lobster than a crab guy, but like crab, I'm talking about crab legs. You know, still good. Like if you're serving crab legs, I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, but see, he's from Rhode Island, and I grew up in Maryland. Like, I'm like, give me the crabs. You know, like I'll take lobster. But, yeah, it's expensive down here. Whereas like crabs, you just buy them in the bucket, like we buy crawfish here in Texas. But yeah, that's a regional thing. It's all good.
But lobster's still way better.
We're fighting, man. It's on site.
No, get out of here. Dude, you're telling me if you could have a nice lobster, you would take crab legs over it?
Nah, I really do like lobster. But the funny thing is, we'll see each other in Galveston this summer, and we're just gonna eat big buckets of crawfish.
Okay, I gotta try that. I definitely
just
gotta try
think of them as really, 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 really small lobster, and you'll be great.
I'm willing to try anything. So, anyways, Bonfim, he's a really good athlete. He's a counter striker, good kickboxer. By the way, put in the chat, crab versus lobster, which you go with. Oh. And if you put crab, you're wrong. He works behind a nice crisp jab. He's good at beating his opponent to the point of contact. He's accurate. I like that he works the body well. He's got this mean, like he what he does, he like throws like a straight right, and then he comes back low with a mean hook to the body, which is really nice. He sits on his punches where he draws. I'd say plus power. I wouldn't say he's a huge power puncher. He will wing like some overhands to get a little wild. He does really well to wrap his shots around his opponent's punches, which I like. He throws wide at the end of his combinations, trying to catch his opponent exiting when he's throwing a combination, which I really like. Nice kicks. Incredible flying knee KO of Terrence McKinney. He does have some defensive issue. The biggest thing is that he pillars. I'm not crazy about that. He also backs straight off. He's a solid wrestler. He's got some nice entries. He's physically strong. He grabs the limb. He'll slam him, similar to his brother. He's more of a BJJ grappler though. Like he's and what I mean by that, he's a submission up, but he's not the best at like winning scrambles. Though he does have 4 subs on his record. Move over to Sadikov. This is a good fighter. I mean, southpaw. He marched down his opponent. good at slipping and ripping. He also does pillar a little too much for my liking. For a guy who wants to counter strike, not the best strategy. His straight left is his best punch. He also crushes the body. He's got nice power, big kicking game. Throws out some spinning attacks. He's a solid wrestler. Though I thought his fight IQ was really bad against Barshev, where he didn't wrestle him enough, even though he had a big advantage there. When he gets on top, he's got hard ground and pound. Though I would say he needs to improve his control on the ground. He is a submission artist. He subbed Terrence McKinney, and he's got good cardio. We got, a big card, a lot of fights. I think this is the best fight on the card. I think they're both, really solid process. I am leading Bonfim. I just think he's better than Souza, probably everywhere, a little more polished, but I'm not. What would you say the line was?
Bonfim is minus 155 or so.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. That's about all right. That's actually probably where I'd have it. So, yeah, give me Bonfim by decision, but I don't have a lot of confidence in this pick. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Sattergaard pulls the upset.
Yeah, I like Bonfim as a prospect. Like, I've always gravitated a little more towards Gabriel as a guy who just seems, younger is always a bonus.
Yeah.
Naturally a little bigger. And both of them have pretty extensive records for as young as they are, but Ismael Bonfim in particular, you look at his record, he has 4 career losses. They're all by submission. Like, one obviously was against Benoit Saint-Denis, that kind of eye-opening fight. They're like one of the first ones that let us know how good Saint-Denis was going to be. The rest of them are losses when he was literally a teenager at the beginning of his career. Like, this guy debuted so young. He got tapped out by Adriano Moraes and Renato Moicano. The Moraes fight, he was 16 years old.
Yeah.
And Moicano, he was like 19. He was still in his teens, when he took those losses. Like, since he hit his 20th birthday, he's something like, 14-1. He's clearly a better grappler than he was early in his career. Yeah, he's a guy that does a lot of things well. Like, that dynamic about his record, it actually reminds me of probably the most famous product of his and his brother's gym, which would be Vicente Luque, where Luque's record doesn't look that impressive, but that's because he started his career like 6-7 fighting in little shows in Brazil when he was 17 years old. Like, once he actually, like, by the time he got to tough, he was a damn good fighter. A little bit of that with the older Bonfim brother. I'm with you. Like, I like Sadikov's tools. He's been a pleasant surprise. I had really modest expectations of him. It was an eye-opener to me when he beat Terrence McKinney, in particular, the way he did. But I'm with you on the Barshev fight. Yeah, it was a draw, but in a fight where he had such a particular stylistic advantage over his opponent, where one of his strong points mapped so directly to one of his opponent's weak points, a draw feels like a loss in terms of what it does to your stock value.
Yeah, I agree.
And on top of that, I thought Barshev actually won. Like, there was no reason for that to be a draw. Like, I didn't think of it as a fight that necessitated any 10-8 rounds. I thought Barshev won round 1, won round 3. It was pretty straightforward, but it went down as a draw. Nonetheless, it leaves Sadikov with something to prove. He's been on the shelf for over a year. I'm still mildly optimistic about him. I'm interested to see, what he has to show after a year on the shelf, a year working out with, Ray Longo. But give me Bonfim as the guy that I think may have actually better tools, even aside from maybe like sheer size, and has been more active. Like, I've seen him more recently and he looked pretty damn good. Give me Bonfim by decision as well, but I'm mildly high on both these guys as prospects. Third from the top on the main card of UFC Fight Night 251, the endless cavalcade of middleweights continues as Edmund Shabazian looks once again for some redemption against Dylan Budka. Shabazian, the 27-year-old Southern California native by way now of Las Vegas, is 13-5 as a professional. He is 6-5 since joining the UFC out of season 2 of Dana White's Contender Series. His UFC run has been the story of wild swings of momentum. He won his first 4 fights in the UFC, 3 of them with blistering first-round finishes, culminating in a head kick of Brad Tavares that catapulted him, still as, I think, barely out of his teens, into top 10 matchups. those top 10 matchups proved to be way too much for him as he was turned back in demoralizing fashion by Derek Brunson, Jack Hermanson, and Nasruddin Imavov in succession. But since those dueling streaks to open his run, he has alternated wins and losses, basically beating the bad fighters and losing to the good ones, is about as simply as I can put it. He is coming into this fight off a loss. He fought most recently on that same Cannonier versus Bahalio card last August, as a lot of Saturday's fighters did, where he ran into Gerald Meerschaert and got Meerschaerted, tapped out in the second round. So, by the pattern, he is due to get back in the win column here. We'll see whether that actually happens and if Dylan Budka has anything to say about it. The 25-year-old Ohioan, who goes by the Mindless Hulk, is 7-4 overall. He's 0-2 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of the Contender Series. He beat Chad Hancom on the Contender Series back in fall of 2023. He fought twice in the UFC last year, and really not getting any breaks from Sean Shelby and Mick Maynard, as his debut was against Cesar Almeida in a fight meant to put Almeida over. And then his bounce back fight after that was against Andre Petrosky, whom we've talked a little bit about. He lost a decision against Petrosky. He's out there now on his third try looking for his first UFC win. He is not favored to get it, as Shabazian is a comfortable minus 300 favorite, Budka plus 240 coming back. Edmund Shabazian has improved. Like, when you look at it with the benefit of hindsight, because
if you say so.
here's the thing. Like, in the moment, as he was just ripping through, like, you know, Darren Stewart and Jack Marshman and eventually running into Brad Tavares, it was hard not to get caught up in the hype. And I'm not even talking about like, Ronda Rousey shows up to, you know, do photo ops with him, but just, wow, here's a 19, 20-year-old kid who is just absolutely blitzing veterans, and even a veteran longtime fringe contender like Brad Tavares. Like, he's got some holes in his game, but nobody's been able to do anything about it yet. And all of a sudden, this kid is fighting title contenders. Those holes in this game got exposed pretty quickly. Like, it honestly, I think a good comparison is Johnny Walker, where Johnny Walker came and just absolutely demolished his first couple of UFC opponents, and everyone could tell that he was a ridiculous fighter. Like, a 6'5" Titanic, you know, light heavyweight who comes out throwing, you know, spinning capoeira kicks and flying knees from 12 feet away. He's not going to make it to the title that way, but nobody's been able to stop him yet. And then ran into Corey Anderson. Anderson laughed off all the smoke and mirrors and just punched him in the face. As soon as Shabazian got to people that weren't obliterated by his initial bursts of offense, he turned out to have serious defensive flaws, an absolutely terrible gas tank, and despite his speed and explosion, a lack of physical strength that just came from honestly being, you know, a young dude who is no Derek Brunson or Nasruddin Imavov in terms of like his physical build. He is now an older and slightly refined version of that, but the ceiling on him is the same as it's ever been. Like, he's been at Extreme Couture now for, I think, 2 or 3 camps. And, you know, if you have problems with game planning, game ness, staying power, Eric Nixick is a good guy to go to. But his last 2 losses, Anthony Hernandez, Gerald Meerschaert, both guys that are very good at either weathering and surviving or, you know, actually defending against early bursts from aggressive athletic fighters and then just pouring it on late. And both did so to Shabazian in pretty predictable fashion. And Shabazian has still proven himself capable of just blowing away guys that aren't top 20 types, like Dalcha Lungiambula, AJ Dobson, neither of them world beaters, and Shabazian crushed him. So, yeah, he's a slightly improved version of the guy he's always been. But I think that's enough here, because Budka very much fits in the mold of the fighters other than Brad Tavares that Shabazian's beat in the UFC. But like there's a path to victory if Budka doesn't get knocked out or, Flash knocked down and tapped out in the first 3 minutes of this fight. All he's got to do is stick around, keep marching forward, make Shabazian react, wait for him to get tired and make mistakes. That's the blueprint. It's still a valid blueprint, but I don't know if Budka has the tools to follow it. Like Shabazian's going to be bigger, much faster, much more dynamic, a harder hitter. Like Budka is hard-nosed, effective, like I could see him being effective with his boxing and maybe even with takedowns on Shabazian if Shabazian gets tired and sloppy late, but I just don't think it gets there. I think Shabazian is going to hit him early and often on the feet, even under the tutelage of Nixick. He tends to wait briefly and then find some moment to explode within the first 90 seconds to 2 minutes of a fight. And when he does, he still throws a very nice variety of techniques on the feet, all of which are accurate and have power. And he does throw them in combination. I mean, he's doing the Terrence McKinney thing and trying to blitz people, McKinney doesn't come out and try to starch people with one shot. He tries to overwhelm them with, a combo of 6 crazy punches and kicks and then shoot a takedown on them while they're reeling and see if he can choke them out. That's more of Shabazian's thing, and I think it's going to work on Budka. Give me Shabazian to get back in the win column, probably a highlight for the reel, and potentially give the Mindless Hulk his walking papers here with a first-round knockout.
Yeah, I mean, this fight shouldn't be on the main card. I mean, either should Delgado and Matthews, but Edmund Shabazian, you're higher than I am. I mean, what I do like is that he's still really young. And then when you go, other than his last fight against Jeremy Mershot, and I mean, Jeremy Mershot is what he's a crafty veteran who's, does what he does to people. The losses that Shabazian has aren't bad losses, to your point. Like they're, I mean, yeah. I mean, how well did the Anthony Hernandez loss age?
Yeah, it's all top 10 fighters, and then Mearshart, who might be the worst possible stylistic matchup for Shabazian.
Yeah, and Mavov,
of any non-ranked fighter. Yeah,
yeah. He's a long and lengthy fighter. His boxing has improved from what you say. He now fights at a slower pace though, trying to conserve his energy. He is cleaning up a bit. He works behind a long jab. He's accurate. He's good at measuring his foe to land his big shots. He's accurate, which for some reason I said twice. He's good at wrapping his punches around his opponent's high guard. His check left hook is his best punch. He has some pop, and he's really now in his prime. He works the body well. Like go back to like the Dolce Limbo fight. He was kicking him to the body a lot. Defense is an issue. He's very hittable. He doesn't check leg kicks. He's you're higher on his grappling than I am. Right? He's a weak offensive wrestler. He's a bad defensive wrestler. He struggles to get off the bottom against Brunson and Hermanson. Again, that's Brunson and Hermanson, but he's also gassed bad in fights. Like, I mean, you always say he's like the electric razor. Like, it goes and it goes quick. The Derek Brunson, Darren Stewart fight against him was clearly way better than he gassed in that one. Jack Hermanson, he gassed against Mershot. He was quickly subbed by Mershot. Again, that doesn't bother me too bad because of what Mershot does. What I like about Buck is he's only 25. Which is really good, but he's super undersized. Like I said before, he looks like he could be a welterweight, and it's crazy because he used to fight a light heavyweight. He is pretty raw on the feet. He also doesn't have the best output. He throws a lot of the same overhand rights. He throws kicks, but he doesn't really set them up, and he's open to be countered. He backs straight up. He has his chin high in the air. He wants to get the fight to the ground, though. He will wrestle, and he will wrestle a lot. He's nonstop with his wrestling. He's not great at it. Like he's not this, superior wrestler, but he does chain. Like he does have the good mindset. He does chain takedown attempts together well. He can close the distance or work in the clinch. He likes to get to the clinch and back his opponent up to the cage, and instead of looking for upper body takedowns, he'll drop down to the hips from there. And and pin his opponent's hips against the cage and then pull him out. He has solid takedown defense. I mean, he struggled against solid takedowns from Petrosky. Petrosky's so much bigger than him, and he struggled to get off the bottom of that. But that's what Petrosky will do. Petrosky was a really terrible stylistic matchup for him. If he gets on top, he doesn't have the best control, but he doesn't care if you get up. He'll take you right back down. He does have 2 subs on his record. Due to his wrestling style, he presses a pretty high pace in the grappling. Like his striking is to close the distance. He has gassed himself out. I don't think that would be the case against Shabazian. Like if someone's going to gas, it'd probably be Shabazian. He also gassed against Cesar Almeida, but I think he took that fight at short notice. Shabazian, I think when you really dig deep and you dissect his record, he isn't the big of a disappointment that sometimes we think of him, and I think that has a lot to do with what you said about Ronda Rousey was picking him out as the next big thing, cornering him, mandering him, and all that stuff. So he didn't live up to that, and like when he first burst on the scene, getting wins over like Brad Tavares, in his 3rd UFC fight and or 4th fight, like he was, at one point he was undefeated and knocking guys out and beating guys like Brad Tavares. Like he looked like the sky was the limit. This would be an all-time low if he loses to Butka. Like you said, when you can kind of dismiss a lot of his losses, even the Mershad one, though it's not that Mershad beat him. It's just I thought he looked really bad in that fight.
Mershad outstruck him even before he got tired.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like Mershad, he looked bad. He looked flat. So this is the one. This is a big step down from Mershad. Like this would be an all-time low if you lose to Butka. And dude, I'm predicting the all-time low. I say Butka presses the action. I say Butka wrestles Shabazian, makes him work. I think he weathers that storm that you talked about. I think he takes down Shabazian over and over again. I think he starts to slow down. I think as he slows down, Butka starts taking control. I really want to take a late stoppage, but I'm going to say Butka wins in a really ugly affair where anybody who's still left on the Edmund Shabazian hype train completely jumps off. Give me Butka another pretty big upset.
That brings us to the co-main event of UFC Vegas 102, a featherweight matchup between Calvin Kattar and Youssef Zalal. Kattar, the 36-year-old Massachusetts native, is 23-8 overall. He's 7-6 in the UFC. He is on a 3-fight losing streak, and it is in fact the first losing streak of his entire career. In his defense, it's against all elite fighters, top 10, if not top 5, in the form of the 2022 version of Josh Emmett, then Arnold Allen, and most recently at UFC 300 last April, Aljamain Sterling in his featherweight debut. So 3 straight setbacks with a full year off, actually more than a year, more like a year and a half off, all of 2023, just with a variety of nagging injuries and probably just needing a break in the wake of some serious blood and guts battles. I mean, he's one of those guys in the featherweight division, but at any rate, 3-fight losing streak, probably about as close as your back can get to the wall for a, long-time contender and reliable action fighter like Kattar. And he'll need to get past Zalal in order not to make it that 4th straight loss. Zalal, 28-year-old, fighting out of Denver, Colorado, is 16-5-1 overall. He is 6-3-1 across 2 separate stints in the UFC. He went 3-3-1 in his first run, was dropped by the promotion, went and won 3 or 4 fights in various regional promotions, mostly in the Intermountain West, then got signed back by the UFC right around a year ago. Since then, he is perfect with 3 straight submission wins over Billy Quarantillo, Yarno Aarons, and Jack Shore. The most recent of those, the Shore fight, was last November at UFC Fight Night, Moreno versus Albazi. So Zalal looks to be a whole new man with a new lease on life in the second UFC run. He'll certainly be a big step towards title contention for him if he can get past Kattar, and he is not just comfortably but almost overwhelmingly favored to do so, as Zalal is minus 400, Kattar plus 300.
Well,
I'll be honest and say I have a tough time getting a read on this fight, and it's because I have a tough time getting a read on Calvin Kattar in striking battles. Like, I know the things that he is good at. Like, I can give you that rundown. In fact, we're both about to, but I find myself frequently surprised by how well it works against one fighter as opposed to the next. Because the thing is, he doesn't have a lot of close striking battles. Like, he'll take on good strikers, people like Giga Chikadze and Dan Ige, and just make them look outclassed. Like, Giga Chikadze, like, literal, championship level kickboxer who had been a sensational striker in the UFC thus far, and Kattar embarrassed him. Dan Ige, like a reliably good featherweight striker with underrated power, underrated variety to his strikes, and Kattar outclassed him for 5 straight rounds. Like, these are both headlining performances where Kattar just showed 5 rounds of awesomeness, really. But then on the flip side, his fight with Max Holloway is legendary for all the wrong reasons. Like, it's unfortunate because Kattar just happened to be the other guy in one of the moments that really made the legend of Max Holloway. Yeah, I mean, Holloway sitting at UFC. Yeah, one of many, but certainly one that sticks out as, he's there getting a UFC record number of strikes landed on him. Holloway is talking to his son, pointing at the canvas. No looks, slipping punches while talking to Dana White at the table.
When they do the Hall of Fame, like when Max Holloway finally gets inducted in the Hall of Fame, and they do that like 5-minute segment, that'll be on it.
Oh, it'll be the second highlight right after him knocking out Justin Gaethje with the buzzer beater. That's the problem for me with Kattar. Now, what I'll say is, Kattar is a massive underdog here. I understand why. He's on a 3-fight losing streak. He is 36 in a division where that's getting on the old side for anybody, let alone someone with the kind of battles that Kattar's been in. And spoilers out of the way, I'm picking Zalal in this one, but watch for Kattar to have a lot more success on the feet than people expect. One thing that I am getting more comfortable predicting about Kattar is he has good success against people that depend on kicking for a lot of their offense. When he's facing a fellow elite boxer, or elite, by MMA standards boxer, he has trouble. Max Holloway, obviously. Arnold Allen gave him plenty of trouble. People like Giga Chikadze, he had a pretty good outing. Even Zabit Magomedsharipov, who at the time they fought was the unsolvable puzzle. I mean, he looked like a future title contender. He was just this insane whirlwind of techniques. And Kattar, just using bread and butter, disciplined boxing, really muted a lot of that. And I think he might have won the fight if
he wasn't stepping on the gas. He was giving away rounds.
Yeah.
But he gave away the first 2 rounds. Or first 3 rounds. Like he ran out of time.
Yeah. And against Zalal, a guy that, again, he's a lanky, Moroccan who's got a cocky little chip on his shoulder. He's a much more complete fighter than that would lead you to believe, but in the striking, he is pretty heavily dependent on his kicks. One thing Kattar can still do is kind of come forward and crowd a kicker. I think he's going to give Zalal some trouble there, but the real revelation about the, Youssef Zalal 2.0 that we heard about from Factory X people and then saw starting, a little over a year ago is he really has embraced that he is a good wrestler and frankly looks like an elite grappler. And I don't know if Kattar's going to be able to deal with that. And because of that, I do lean Zalal. And while I wouldn't be comfortable putting money on him at minus 400, I understand why he's a big favorite, because as good a striker as Kattar is, he's not a one-shot knockout artist. And I think Zalal has that safety valve if he starts getting stuff he doesn't like on the feet. So give me Zalal to win in a real fun fight here. And yeah, like if I'm seeing this fight right, it's going to be surprisingly competitive on the feet, but Zalal is going to have that out that is going to allow him to win close rounds, kind of hit the escape button if Kattar really does start putting it on him. Yeah, give me Zalal to mix up his martial arts and hand Calvin Kattar his 4th straight loss in a potential fight of the night contender.
Yeah, this is the biggest thing about Kattar right away. This jumps out to me is his age, as you mentioned, 36 years old, and you talk about the beatings he's taken.
Going to be 37 next month.
Yeah, 37 years old, and you talk about the beatings he's taken. You didn't even mention the long layoffs he had because of injuries. I mean, he blew his knee out and all kinds of things, and he's also at the age where everything can just fall apart so quick. The guy, you making guys miss by inches, and now they're not missing, by those distance they're landing shots. You talk about his boxing. He's a boxer. He's obviously technically sound, fights out of both stances. He has kind of had that boxing footwork where he cuts angles really well. He starts slow, and I mean, I wasn't going to bring it up, but you go back to like the Magomed Sharapov fight where he was trying to set traps, which he could pick up later, but he's really made for 5-round fights. It's hard to do that and start off slow in 3-round fights because you give away moments, too big of moments as he did. He does pick up the pace when he does find his shots. He had a really good volume against Giga Chikadze. He likes to work from the outside. He has quick hands. He's accurate. He throws straight shots down the pipe. He's very similar to like Sean Strickland, where he has no issue just jabbing his opponent to death. When he does get his timing, though, he'll start sitting on his punches, landing a little bit more power shots. He loves to time his opponent's attacks with like a step back uppercut. I do like that often he'll throw hard like hook as soon as he switches to southpaw. That's really intelligent thing to do, kind of mess with someone's psyche. He goes to the pocket a lot. The body a lot when he gets inside the pocket. One thing for like a I don't want to say elite striker, but someone we think of as a good striker, he doesn't have fight ending power. He's a guy that it's all about the cumulative, but when he's on his game, he turns, and I've said this, I'm going to continue saying this. I mean, he busted up Giga Chikadze. He made Jeremy Stevens like wrestle, which is no one has ever done. Dan Ige pulled guard because of how easily he was getting picked up. He loves to look for elbows inside, and he did against Chikadze. He doesn't really check leg kicks, so that's concerning. He almost never offensive wrestlers, and he's a bad defensive wrestler. I mean, Sharapov put him on the canvas over and over again. Aljamain Sterling in his last fight made him look like a takedown dummy. He had no urgency to get off the bottom. He had no way to get on the bottom. His toughness can't be challenged, though. I mean, the beating he took against Max Holloway is legendary. I mean, it took years off his life, so he's got the heart. Zalal, I mean, this guy's looked so good recently. He's a great athlete, long and lengthy fighter. He's elusive on the feet. I like his boxing. I think he's got very good boxing, good distance striking, fast hands. But like you said, it's not. I think he could do okay in the boxing against Kattar. It's the other tools. It's the step in knees. It's the big kicks. He's got great leg kicks. He's got dangerous high kick. And then it's his wrestling. I mean, he's a really good wrestler. I mean, he loves that like step in the pocket and hit this like nasty judo, Steve Mako type nasty foot sweep that he does. He doesn't have the best takedown defense, but if he gets the fight to the ground, he's an incredible grappler. I mean, he took Billy Quarantillo's back super easily and several times. He has a submission artist. He sub Billy Quarantillo. He sub Jack Shore. I mean, those are some really impressive guys, grapplers that he's subbing. He's got 4 straight submission wins on his record. He's also hard to submit himself. Like even when we didn't have good Yusuf Salal, he had moments where there was flashes. Like I go back to when he fought Ilia Topuria, and Topuria had some deep submissions on him a bunch of times, and he was finding ways to get out of it. And he's got
that might still be the toughest fight someone's given Ilia Topuria.
Yeah, I know, it's great. And this wasn't prime Zalal. He came on late in that fight against Topuria, and he came on late against Damar Blackshear, who at that time was, and I still think is a very good fighter. You seem like you think this fight is a lot closer than it is. I'm on the opposite. I think Zalal is a terrible stylistic match from Kattar. say what you want about Zalal, he's not dumb. I expect him to look at that Sterling fight and do exactly the same thing Sterling did. I expect him to take Kattar down and to dominate in the ground. The difference is Kattar, I mean, that was UFC 300. That was one of the biggest card of years, and you had the worst performance on the entire card. I think Kattar's going to show some urgency to get out of the bottom because I can see it's going to be like, dude, we're not going to do this again. We just get held down for 15 minutes. I think that urgency is going to be backfiring him. I think he's going to get himself in trouble. I think this leads to a mistake. Kattar is, underrated defensive grappler. I think Zalal does it. I think Zalal does what Sterling couldn't do. I think Zalal subs him. Give me Zalal by second round submission.
You know what? This is something, I love the breakdown, but this is something we talk about on previews sometimes and on recaps frequently. When you're a minus 400 favorite, just getting your hand raised at the end is not enough to keep your stock value.
Sure.
Like something more impressive is expected out of you. Tapping out Kattar would be a good step in that direction.
I'm all in on
just like
Zalal.
you mentioned.
I'm all in.
So am I. I don't think I've maybe not quite recognized yet how compromised Kattar is. Like maybe I have a lesson coming my way on Saturday.
It could be a little bit of that, and it's also I'm just like I think Zalal could be a top 5 guy.
I feel, you know what, like his first fight with Topuria, we might end up looking at that like Edwards Usman one when these guys meet for a title a year and a half from now.
Yeah,
like not saying that Zalal would win the rematch, but like it's barely even relevant to who they are now.
Yeah. People don't know who they were. I mean, Conor versus Holloway when they first fought each other, like people don't know what the treat they got at that time.
And Poirier versus Holloway, like real early. Like,
yeah.
Poor Holloway. Like, what are they doing to him in his first like 4 fights in the UFC?
He's like 19, 20 years old. Yeah.
Skinny, like no tattoos.
Oh, yeah.
Like, With that, we come to the main event of UFC Fight Night 251, a middleweight contenders bout between former title challenger Jared Cannonier and the fast-rising Gregory Rodriguez. Cannonier, the 40-year-old Texan by way of Alaska, by way of Arizona, is 17-8 overall. He's 10-8 in the UFC. He is one of those rare fighters that has wins in 3 different UFC divisions, as he started off in the promotion as a almost comically undersized heavyweight before making his way down to light heavyweight and finally to middleweight, where he truly found his home and, again, strung together enough wins to get a shot at Israel Adesanya back in July of 2022. That did not go his way, but he has remained a fixture in the top reaches of the top 10 since then, with wins over Sean Strickland, that aged decently, wins over Marvin Vettori, and then losses to Nasruddin Imavov and Caio Borralho. The most recent of those, the Borralho fight, was last August in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 62, and it marked back-to-back losses for Cannonier, the first back-to-back losses of his middleweight run. I mean, he lost to Jan Blachowicz and Dominic Reyes back-to-back way back in 2017 and 2018. But not only was that, again, not in his best weight class, but, well, those losses aged decently for him as well. At any rate, I'm sure he would like for it not to be 3 in a row. He'll need to get past the man they call RoboCop in order to avoid that. 32-year-old Brazilian, now training out of South Florida, is 16-5 overall. He is 7-2 since joining the UFC out of season 4 of Dana White's Contender Series. Ever since his shocking first-round knockout loss to Bruno Ferreira right around 2 years ago, he has been perfect with 3 straight wins over Dennis Tiuliulin, Brad Tavares, and Christian Leroy Duncan. The most recent of those, the Duncan fight, was at UFC 304 last July. So a win for him here would be 4 in a row in this division. It would certainly put him on the short list for a title shot, even though that line is starting to get a little long. He'll be able to throw his name in there with a win over Cannonier. The favorite in this fight is minus 180. The underdog plus 150. Who are they, Keith?
It's tough. Man, I'm not sure. I'm going to see Rodriguez is.
You are correct. Gregory Rodriguez minus 180. Jared Cannonier plus
This should be much
150.
closer.
I mean, it's fairly close. It could stand to be closer. I think it's going to be a close fight. Well, one, I think it's going to be a close fight because at middleweight, at least, people just don't blow out Jared Cannonier. Like,
No.
you know, we've seen his ceiling against the elite of the division. You know, like, I'm not going to call Jared Cannonier a gatekeeper. I mean, the guy fought for a title. He has multiple top 10 wins, probably some top 5 wins. Mm-hmm. You know, but if he's a gatekeeper, it's a gatekeeper to like the top 3. Because below that level, you know, if you're a solid top 10 guy, if you're Marvin Vettori, if you're Jack Hermanson, Derek Brunson, he's got something for you.
He's a gatekeeper. It's string a bell at the door for in Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't know the actor's real name, but that's Stringer Bell. They're about the same age.
I can't think of the actor's name now either because you said Stringer Bell.
Yeah, they're probably the same age, but
yeah,
it's Jared Cannonier. And I'm sure that guy had like some friggin' magic rocks or some shit that he was. No, it wasn't Guardians of the Galaxy. It was Thor. I'm sorry, I'm mixing up my nerdy movies that the young bucks like.
Yeah, it's
Thor. It was a Thor.
Yeah, Idris Elba. Thank you.
Yeah. He's guarding the friggin'.
He's guarding that rainbow bridge.
Yeah. Someone Jared Cannonier thinks he's doing the same thing with his magic rocks.
Probably. He is a delightful, like, oddball of a guy. Obviously, you know, just.
Yeah, he's a weird dude.
He's a weird dude, but hey, that's cool. And yeah, he's 40 and he's going to be 41 in a couple weeks. Like, his birthday's in March, just like Calvin Kattar's. He's going to be 41 in, like, it's middleweight. It's not light heavyweight or heavyweight. Like, your 40s is really old to be competing in the top 5 in the middleweight division.
Unless you will Ramirez, like, hold my beer. Well, he's probably more like hold my protein shake and
hold my something shake
with a bunch of stuff in
it. Talk about a weird cat. And anyway, like, Cannonier, he has slowed a little bit. Like, the reflexes, the durability, the gas tank, they've all slipped a little bit, but not a whole lot. You know, certainly there's a possibility that there's significant decline between last August and now. It tends to happen all at once when it happens, but I'm going to assume that he is still a high power, not high enough volume, kind of quick strike kickboxer with, nasty kicks, good power everywhere, good defensive fundamentals, and formerly terrible takedown defense, which has now become mediocre but improving. Like, that would be my book on Jared Cannonier. Despite being small and compact for the division, he's extremely physically strong. I mean, this is a guy that debuted in the UFC against Sean Jordan, who probably weighed 70 pounds more than Cannonier weighs right now. This is a rough matchup for him because Rodriguez, on top of being younger, even if he's not terribly young himself, is like a lot bigger, a very good athlete himself. He's not as polished a striker as Cannonier, but he might be able to win rounds on the feet just by throwing higher volume while Cannonier waits. And then on top of everything else, Rodriguez he's not a polished or technical or nuanced offensive wrestler, but he's a pretty effective one just out of pure horsepower. We've said a similar thing about a couple fighters on this card, mostly Brazilian grapplers. He's cut from that mold, and I think his I think his offensive wrestling is going to be plenty good to take Cannonier down, and where Cannonier's get up and sweep game has been improving even more than just his strict takedown defense. I mean, it was fantastic when he got taken down by Derek Brunson, swept him instantly, and pounded him out like 10 seconds later. Like, that was an eye opener for me. That was an event I covered in person, and I figured the biggest mismatch out of their matchup was going to be Brunson's offensive wrestling against Cannonier's defensive wrestling, and it was until about, again, 15 seconds later when Cannonier was punching holes in his head. I think Rodriguez will be able to take Cannonier down and not get swept. I do think that it's going to be kind of a long night for Cannonier, which, I mean, in some ways that's better than the short night. But give me Rodriguez to probably win 4 rounds out of 5 against Cannonier. Again, I think he would do fine even if they decide to contest this fight 90% on the feet, just because I trust him more to be willing to come forward, go first, throw more strikes. That tends to sway the judges in close rounds. And then on top of that, I do think he's going to be able to take Cannonier down and put in work, maybe do damage there. Cannonier's get-up ability and just native toughness, level of experience with elite competition makes me think Rodriguez won't get the finish unless Cannonier really is looking his age overnight. But give me Rodriguez in a pretty one-sided decision here.
Yeah. So we didn't really went with our grades for the card.
I didn't bother asking this one.
Yeah. I'm going D+, and there's a lot of talent I like. Like the prelims on this card and the undercard is better than UFC 312. Not counting the top 2 title fights. They have the Bonfim brothers. You get some other Cavalcanti. Sounds exciting. And we had a couple
every prelim has one exciting prospect, but none of them have 2. Like, I'm excited for a lot of the individual fighters, but not many of the actual matchups.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of times cards get ranked based on the higher up the card, the more weight it holds. And again, I'm not comparing. Pay-per-views get ranked harder than what I call in-house cards when they go to Toronto for a fight night or something like that. And then the lowest one is your Apex cards. The problem is it's hard to get excited for Cannonier in the main event. I mean, I don't get too excited for someone who's 41 years old, whose ceiling is, I don't know, 7th best guy in the world, maybe. And I'm not. I was throwing a number out there. I'm not. Don't count guys and say and say, oh, this really should be it. You forgot this guy. I'm just give or take.
Mm-hmm.
So he's still, now. Don't get me wrong. He still has a lot of skills, and in his recent losses have gone against really good guys. So, and he wasn't blown out in those fights.
Nope.
He can fight out of both stances. He's a pressure fighter. His hand speed is dropping, but it's still pretty quick. He's explosive. He works behind a stiff jab. He's got this nice, short, tight inside boxing game. He has this nice slip right counter. I'd say he has plus power that comes from those massive legs that generates his power. He sits on his punches. He throws hard kicks. He isn't a technical wrestler, but he will close the distance and use his strength inside the clinch. If he grabs the leg, a couple guys in this card similar. If he grabs the leg, he can instantly slam you. He is a little inconsistent on his defensive wrestling. One fight it looks like he's very hard to take down. Other fights it seems like it's a little easier to take down. If he gets on top, though, he's got some scary ground pound. I mean, I've compared it to Derek Lewis in the past, where he just he don't care. He'll club right through your blocking punches from the close guard. He'll just punch through him. The big issue I have with him though is his durability. I mean, his chin is starting to crack. And again, he's losing to really good guys. But the question is Gregory Rodriguez a really good guy? Now, Rodriguez is a big middleweight. I think his striking has greatly improved. Where he used to be just a brawler, that's not the case anymore. He marches down his foe. His volume has really jumped. He's got faster hands than I was doing the tapes on him. He's got faster hands than I originally remembered. It's accurate. He gets inside in the pocket. He throws some big shots. He's starting to throw a lot more straight shots. Though if he gets a chance, he still wants one to land one of those big looping massive hooks, and he does load up a little bit. But if he connects, he's got some big power. He's willing to eat a shot to land some shots, which is a little concerning, especially with someone like Cannonier. He's a good wrestler. He looks for upper body takedowns, or he can just blast. He has like a blast double, which blast through the hips. Sometimes he'll just duck his head and instead of setting up his entries and reaching, kind of putting his head down, which is concerning. But if he grabs the legs, similar to Cannonier, I mean, you can go for a ride. If he's different than Cannonier, where he does have good ground and pound, but he's definitely he's a submission artist on the ground. He's a bit of a wizard. He'll lose position chasing a submission. He has faded in the past, but his cardio has been much better. Again, now this is obviously a 5-round fight, so that's a little more concerning. This is a hard fight because this is a step up in competition for Rodriguez, going from Brad Tavares 2 fights ago, and who was his last fight? I can't think who he fought last, but it's going from that to he fought Chris Duncan.
Yeah,
go from Chris Duncan up to Jared Cannonier. That's tough, even a 41-year-old Cannonier. But I'm with you, man. I was leaning Cannonier, being like, yeah, he hasn't lost to bad competition. It's not going through the things. But you know what? I'm ready for the torch to be passed. I think Rodriguez passes the test. I say he catches Cannonier. I say Cannonier maybe his chin continues to fail him, and it's time for him to maybe think about hanging up. I say Rodriguez does it. I say he catches him. Let's do it in the first round. I say Rodriguez for first round TKO.
And there you have it, the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Vegas 102. Cannonier versus Rodriguez. I have been Ben. He has been Keith. If this is your first time watching or listening to one of our previews, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We do our best to bring you a mix of actual in-depth analysis and occasional historical or humorous asides that we think is pretty unique in this space. We had a long story time this time. I enjoyed it. I hope you did. Anyway, please do like, subscribe. None of those things cost you anything, and they make our bosses happy with us. They allow us to keep bringing you this content free of charge. Drop us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. We'd love to hear your take on these fights. We usually have a unanimous upset pick or two. There were none on this card, but there was a lot of disagreement for us. I think we disagreed on 5 or 6 out of the 13 fights. So, if we disagreed, he's probably right. But if you think I'm right, let us know in the comments, because if you call him right, we'll give you your credit on the recap. You just got to come collect it. We're live on the Sherdog YouTube page right after the main event. Keith takes the captain's chair. We'll talk about all these fights from the top down to the first prelim, talking about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. Talking about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers, and talking with you. The live chat is open that whole time, so we are taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that come hang out with us after the fights. They are some of the smartest and coolest fans in all of the mixed martial arts space, along with a couple of doofuses, but we love them too. We'd love for you to join the party. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week. Go Eagles, and by all means, enjoy the fights.
Make your bed of fairy tales while you're